Welcome to the B&B Show. My name is Brandon Kane here, and this guy to my left, of course, is Brendan. That's Seahawks Brendan Nelson, back in the house here at the Hawks Nest. Kind sir, how you doing this evening?
Tonight's going good. Tonight is going good. I'm ready. I'm ready to talk about these Seahawks who are doing some very interesting things right now, aren't they?
It is. It's been an offseason already out the gate, Brendan, of intrigue and what would seem to be, at least on the surface of things, a lot of smart decisions. And they have continued to drive towards that direction in this past week since we last spoke, and that we've had some honest-to-God hires now under Mike McDonald and the collection the staff brought underneath him. And so we've got some guys that we've got to chop along that. We're going to as well, really the theme of this show as we transition into that as well is going to be to look at really the internal Seahawks free agents and kind of build a little bit more for the case for whether me or Brennan are looking to retain him based on some of the salary projections we're seeing from these players on some of the various sites. So we're going to go through a lot of different ground tonight: coaching, internal free agents. We're going to be covering it all here this evening, but no matter what, please do hit that like button, get subbed up to both our channels here, be it Seahawks Brendan Nelson or the Hawks Nest. And from that point, I guess let's just jump into these coaching hires because we haven't had a chance to talk about it, Brendan. I guess the first one out the gate would be, we hadn't spoken about Grubb yet, even with him being hired, right?
No, everything of significance has happened in the last week, basically. So we got some stuff to unpack here with every layer of this coaching staff, and really 4 that are supremely impactful. There are 4 that have happened in the last 7 days that I think are going to have an impact on this team. Going chronologically, the first one was, I think, Friday last week. Aiden Durde, and I do believe that is how you pronounce it. I actually looked it up. There's a video of him pronouncing it for us, so that was nice of him.
I'm going AD.
Yeah, AD. Aiden Durde, a British coach from overseas, a Dan Quinn disciple. He spent 6 years under Dan Quinn, 3 in Atlanta, 3 in Dallas, mostly as a defensive line coach. And now he gets his opportunity to be a defensive coordinator here in the NFL. So Aiden Durde, I've already made a couple videos on him with my thoughts. Do you have anything of significance with this guy and what he might be bringing?
You're looking for a positional coach to go to being a coordinator, Brendan. You're looking for a guy that's done a good job in that prior role. I think something that bothered me a little bit about Clint Hurt being risen to the defensive coordinator role when he was the fact that his background of work here in Seattle wasn't exactly that of, wow, he's done such great work down there on the defensive line. It was adequate, in my opinion, but it wasn't some monstrously great amount of stuff that he was getting done. On the inverse side of that, when you look at AD here, saying that Micah Parsons coming out and being a guy who didn't do a lot of edge rushing out of Penn State, more of a off-ball linebacker. He's been great. DeMarcus Lawrence has continued to play at a high level. They've gotten young guys coming through there that have played well to their roles, but have provided productivity from the interior of that line. I think a lot of the issues, if there were issues with the Cowboy defense, that was a good defense, but if there were maybe more issues than not, it was their linebacker room got thinned out and their secondary started to kind of fail them, especially once Diggs went down with an injury. The front line up there, that defensive line held up their end of the bargain, Brendan. And even the guys that are in that kind of rotational role, you even saw productivity from them, the Dorrance Armstrongs, the Sam Williams. I think that speaks to his ability to train these guys up to have so productive. And one little thing I'll say that's also nice in thinking about it is that I think he brings the element to this defensive line of the use of the stunts. The Cowboys use stunting like no team in the NFL. And so he's going to bring that with it. And they ran it with a certain style and unique approach in the way that they did it in their commitment to it, Brendan. That makes me wonder if we're going to look to bring that. And now you start thinking about Mike McDonald's very complicated defensive fronts and what it's showing the offense already. And now you stack on top of that the stunting ability off the back of it with guys dropping into coverage. And boy, that just adds another extra layer of difficulty to the defense, does it not?
Yeah, it is. And it's worth noting that Dan Quinn's background is mostly as a defensive line coach. So learning under him as his defensive line coach, that's pretty strong. That's something that goes back to Dan Quinn when he was at Florida with the Gators. Some of the work he did with some defensive linemen that ended up being really high draft picks, guys who played really well at the college level. So I think this is, I don't know if it's an exciting hire, because I don't know how much the DC is going to do on this team right now, because he's got a couple guys in front of him with McDonald calling plays, and you've also got Leslie Frazier there. And of the two guys, Aiden Durd and Leslie Frazier, I think I know who Mike McDonald is going to be a little more interested in listening to.
Yeah, I think he's in what would, if you can call it this, a developmental defensive coordinator role. It's unique, but it's also unique to have a coach who's going to call the defensive play calls. That's just why it is this way. And I don't think you're going to attract some super top end candidate who is going to be stuck third in the pecking order in any situation. So it's as good as you can hope to get there.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I think the hire is good. I wasn't too worried. They couldn't have done much that would have upset me here because I understand the dynamics here. But even a guy like Terrell Basham was pretty good for the Cowboys defensive line back in 2021. He was only there 1 year, but had one of his better years. A guy like Neville Gallimore has kind of slowly started to develop there as well. The one thing that I noticed looking at these Cowboys defensive lines, it feels like they've really had trouble developing that run stuffer. Like Mozzie Smith is the one that everyone talks about, but there was also Quentin Bohanna. They drafted him with the intention of him being a run stuffer, and it never worked out. Mm-hmm. So that would be like the one blind spot here with Aiden Durd. But for the most part, when I looked at these defensive lines, I was impressed with the depth of meaningful contribution. Like you said, Dorrance Armstrong, Sam Williams, Odighi Zua. These guys were very valuable parts of this elite defense the last 3 years.
Yeah. And most of the time you're going to get a guy that's going to get one or two guys out. I mean, that's a little bit like what Hurt's whole thing was like, well, he got this done with Frank Clark and he got that done with Jaron Reed. So give him the job. Well, this guy, you're seeing the impact throughout the whole depth of the positional groups. And that speaks to his ability to train that up. You can't discount Quinn because certainly he had some contributions into that being his background is in that spot. But I'm okay with this being that developmental role. It's with McDonald run things and Frazier as his backup. You were set here. So this was nothing but just as good as I think you could hope to kind of get for this kind of position. And he can hopefully learn even more and just gain stronger and stronger into that role.
All right. So this next one, this was the big one. This was the big swing. And there are some Seahawks fans that they just completely bought into this one the moment this one came down because this feels like a seismic change in the way things are going to be done in Seattle on offense. A couple days after Aiden Durd, they made it official with Ryan Grubb, offensive coordinator, comes over from the Washington Huskies, spent, I guess, 3 weeks in Alabama, realized there's nothing to do down there.
As one does.
Yeah. I mean, you can, what's in Alabama? Come on. I mean, can you blame them?
Incest.
Yeah, I got nothing. You could buy like a 30-acre plot of land for like $30, I guess. But then what do you do on it? Nothing. You look at it. You just look at this massive patch of swamp land.
And end up with a dust bowl.
Mm-hmm. Right. So he quickly came back to Washington State, was photographed in a pub with John and Mike, which was that was a very fun evening on Seahawks Twitter, by the way. It
was awesome. Yeah, it was. Mm-hmm. It looks nothing like him. Nothing like him. I'm telling you.
Yeah. Drive-by journalism.
Mm-hmm.
But we made it happen. Ryan Grubb's your OC, and that's big. Like, this matters a lot. And I have some concerns. I'm aware of the fact this guy's never coached at any level in the NFL before. But if this works, this is going to work really, really well. So how do you feel about Ryan Grubb right now?
Well, I think I look at these kind of coaching hires, Brendan, or even the coaching hire we made, and I say to myself, at the onset of this, what would I rather have? We get down to one of those eternal arguments in the Hawks fandom, safe approach. Do you take the trail that's been walked upon that that there's no potential, or do you take maybe potentially not a shortcut? I don't want to use that terminology here because this isn't a shortcut way of doing it, but I think that you have a boom or bust situation that exists with Michael McDonald that is unique in his hiring. Young hire, youngest coach in the league. You didn't run for safety with that, Brendan. Strikes me that with this Grubb hiring, you're also not running for safety. And that means to me that in these hiring and this staff that's been put together, there is a great bust and there's a great boom and a great bust factor. And it doesn't seem to me like this, it looks like one to me that will find its way of being just sort of into a middle ground stage of things, which I love. Pick a lane, go hard, try to take the big swing, see if you can put it up in the second deck. And if you miss, it ain't the worst thing if it don't work. That's not the worst eventuality here. If the goal is to seek to try to make the greatest, biggest thing. And sometimes you're going to miss when you try to do that. And sometimes you're going to hit. And if you do things smartly in building that big swing, and that's what I'll say to this, Brendan, is I think these hires have a lot of intelligence behind them. then you can understand how they're thinking, yeah, it's a big swing. Yeah, we're going to try to put this up in the second deck. But we also have we're on this. We're also doing it intelligently and smartly, getting to that place and making these swings. And Grubb's just more of that to McDonald, in my opinion. And would you not feel the same way that this is something you would have wanted to see on the onset of this? I'm not to say these candidates exactly, but the spirit of the search to be one that sends you in the direction of look for the best. And maybe that isn't the safe ground. It's like, everybody wants to kind of get both things, Brendan. I want the safety and I want the best. It's like, well, sometimes you just got to pick one or the other.
Yeah, I personally did advocate a little bit for the idea of going a little bit safer with this hire. I did think that made some sense because you had already gone kind of bold with the Mike McDonald hire.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean this won't work. And this doesn't mean that this is a bad hire. It's not. This is the hottest offensive coordinator in college football coming off the last 2 years. Like the hottest, not one of the hottest, the hottest. The work he did over the last 2 years in Washington was incredible. And he was taking over a team. And I know obviously Kalen DeBoer has a lot to do with it, but he was taking over a team that was bad, that couldn't move the ball, that couldn't score. I know he got some new players, but he was taking over a team that had one of the worst offenses in school history. And overnight takes them to the top 10 in the country in points scored, 40 points a game, like it's nothing. So it's a good resume. It's just all in college football. Like he was at Fresno State. What he did at Fresno State was good. Like the Fresno State stuff. And I want to talk more about that in a second here. But if you want to go back to like what he was doing at like Sioux Fall, and I understand some people don't want to take that one all that seriously, right? Like it's Sioux Fall, it's the South Dakota State Jackrabbits, high school. Like I understand that stuff is whatever. But the other exciting part of this, former offensive line coach. And when you consider the fact that he's bringing, and we'll talk about this more in a second, the Washington offensive line coach with him, it sure seems like we're going to have a focus on this offensive line that we have not had in quite some time in Seattle.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what makes him a fun spread concept guy, or if we want to call him an air raid guy, Brendan, in that background, is that he's like McDonald has. They have a background in something, but you can see their hands and their fingerprints upon what they're making that is their identity and their particular one to it. And I think in the ways with him that strikes to me as number one, spread concept guys don't tend to have the offensive line background. Offensive linemen are kind of looked at as sort of like necessary evil. Can they move in space? That's what you'll typically have an air raid guy might ask you about his lineman.
Yeah.
But he has more of a care of understanding. I've got to get the job done up there up front. He creates the power concepts out of spread. You basically get into like those shotgun looks with where you have the two linebackers, the Mike and the Will, and then you get a receiver flexed out. You pull that Will out there if you can with, let's say, a move tight end, and you take him off the ball and move him off, and you get a situation where you have a numbers game and it's only the Mike, and you got your back, and you can get a kind of a hat on the hat and how you block it up, and especially if you're pulling guys back across the screen, the formation post snap, which is a lot of what he does is have those guys pull in motion. You really then start to create the numbers game, and especially for a guy like Walker, pulling that guy out of the line of scrimmage to create the power concepts, if in a lot of what he does, still gives him an opportunity to utilize what he does best, because now that's one less body out of the line of scrimmage, Brendan. It's one less, it's a little bit more space in there for him to do his moves, his jukes, to get free, and say nothing of Charbonnet, who also benefits on this. So there's that. And the secondary part, the two other parts I like that are counter to what you usually get in the air raid concepts are the number one, the willingness to build the shot plays into the offense. Again, tends to be a necessary evil with the spreads concepts that we're just here to dink and dunk, and we're not really going to take our shots over the top, or we'll very rarely do so. Whereas him, he's looking to get an explosive play. I think, what did he say, Brendan? Once every 16% of the plays, he wants an explosive in there. So that's kind of
one every six, right? Yeah.
I thought it was 16. I was trying to listen to the interview that he was giving.
It was like, 16% would be one of six. So
oh, there you go. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So we got, 1 of 6 plays trying to get it. And then the last point is he's not building it to be the hyper, let's go 100 million miles an hour and snap the ball constantly thing, right? He's not trying to get off too many snaps, and he's not trying to make his quarterback run too much. Geno Smith ran more last year than Michael Penix did. So he's not needing to build that in. I love all that. And that's all, to me, a little bit more of a modernized spread concept. So it's like, okay, you spread, but let's not go crazy. You can't have 1,150 plays in your defense because you're running hurry up throughout the whole game. Can't run your quarterback 400, 200 times in a season and expect that to work.
Right. Especially when it's a quarterback like this, an older quarterback who that's not really his game. So obviously a lot of people are looking at what Washington did last year as a template for what we can expect from the Seahawks this year, which is ton of pre-snap motion almost every single play.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna go for it on fourth down a lot, although that's more of a head coaching thing. I think McDonald is probably gonna enable that. You're gonna see, and the interesting thing is, because this is one debate that I've seen, it's about the downfield aspect of this offense with Grubb now, because with Penix these last 2 years, we pushed the ball down the field all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Probably one of the highest rates of downfield attacking in the entire country.
Mm-hmm.
But what some people think is that was more of a Penix thing, where Penix always wanted to take the big shot, and that Grubb might actually prefer to pull it back a little bit like he had it at Fresno State, because his quarterback there was Jake Haener. The average depth of target in that Fresno State offense was like 8.7 yards. In Washington, it was 10.
Mm-hmm.
Much more attacking the intermediate areas of the field, and basically more of a horizontal passing attack than the vertical passing attack they've had the last 2 years with Penix. So, number one, that shows you he can do it both ways, which that's
Mm-hmm.
cool. But when rubber meets the road here with the Seahawks, what do you think Grubb wants? Does he want to just wing the ball down the field all the time, or is he thinking about this as a horizontal passing attack?
Well, I think that he fit with Fresno State, and what he did with Jake Haener had a lot to do with probably a little bit of Jake Haener's inability to push the ball down the field. You're not going to ask a guy that's got a 40-yard arm to go throw 50-yard go routes. So him leaning on what he does well fits alignment, and this is where you have seen, whether it's Dird talking about this, or McDonald talking about this, or Grubb talking about this, they've all been in succession and mentioning this in their press conferences, which is about getting the most out of the players. It's about utilizing what's here, not about what my thing wants to be. What do I got here is the first step of this process. And then I bring my thing with that. So when it comes to taking shot plays, you have guys that can get deep in Tyler Lockett and DK. Even JSN had some spots last year where he was getting open deep at times. I think when I look at the spread concepts and where it became stilted with a Chip Kelly, where we were all waiting for the Chip Kelly thing to just sort of sweep through the league right about 13 or 14, when he got to the pros, like, okay, well, this is the next evolution offensively and where things go, is that it has these things that were detrimental to it no matter what it was doing from a production standpoint, right? I mean, didn't like Foles throw for like 40 touchdowns or something in this offense one year?
Yeah.
It's that it had these detriments and he's attacked that. And one of those detriments was the spread, where you're just sort of picking, the defenses creep up, and they start to take that stuff away. And you'll have given defenses that'll eventually say, okay, we're going to take this away. And you don't have that stuff built in your offense, and you don't have the playmakers on the outside that can test us deep now. And that's where I think he's understanding that and making this attack. Part of it's a little bit to your point of, I got Penix who's got the arm to do this. Part of it's also that I think that if I'm running a spread concept, air raid concept now, and especially pro level, I've got to understand I can't just live and die completely by what I'm doing on short and intermediate. I've got to know the defenses in this day and age are going to realize I'm doing that, and they're going to drive up on those routes and make them less effective. So I've got to still challenge them deep. I think you see this too, Brendan, with the trick play usage, because Washington averaged more than one trick play a game as well over the past couple of years, which I think is also indicative of the fact that your trick plays aren't looking to make a little short throw completion. Trick plays are looking to go get big chunks down the football field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. I did think about that a little bit too, all the trick plays that we ran. But I guess the point here is that Grubb has excelled with both. He's excelled with a quarterback that can't throw the ball past 30 yards, and then he excelled with Michael Penix. And both offenses had a lot in common, but there was a clear difference once you had the quarterback who could actually push the ball down the field. So some people took the Grubb hiring as a belief that we're just going to move heaven and earth to go get Penix in the draft. And I was like, I'm not so sure about that, because he's found success with completely different types of quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think as well, the offensive line background, you think, might factor into this outlook on Penix as well, where do I want to put Michael behind this offensive line where it's currently sitting? The only way a Penix selection makes sense to me is if like your next 3 picks are on the offensive line. Which I know the team couldn't afford to do. And so I come back again and again. I just don't know how that adds up. This guy will be uniquely aware of the fact that he can't let his guy get hit. He'll be uniquely aware of the value of an offensive line. He'll be very keenly aware of the fact that this offensive line that we have currently constructed will not get that job done. And I think that I don't know how he can look at the situation other than Brendan. Here's what I'll say is if Grubb makes that pick, as much as I'd go, well, that doesn't make sense to me. I'd also go, wow, though, that really tells you with a guy like Grubb on this of not just a comfortability factor, but of a believing in the upside of Penix at that point, right? That's with the offensive line, the state of it is, it would be a ringing endorsement to the fact that he sees Penix as this, as a defining talent. I'm not saying generational, but just as a defining type talent at the position at that point to take him, given those circumstances.
Right. So I like the hire. I'm aware of the fact that it can go wrong, but I'm willing to live with the fact that it can go wrong. Like most things can go wrong. Vast majority of things that you can do are going to go wrong. Like you could hire Jim Harbaugh, and I guess that couldn't go that wrong because he's just been so good everywhere he's been. But short of that, you're taking risks. This is a nice risk to take because the upside is we're going to have one of the best offenses in the league.
That's right. The boom factor. And to your point on the bust factor of that, I've related it to the Dan Campbell situation. If you've taken the big swing, okay, we swing and miss, go through this year. It's just not working. He's a college coach. Go back to the college level. So be it. C'est la vie. You can then move around and go get your next offensive coordinator. Maybe there's a better, brighter candidate at that point that jumps to the surface, at the forefront at that point. Maybe more certainty at that point, if that's what we had to do. And that's what Campbell did with Detroit. Bad first year, comes back, gets gets his guy Johnson in there in the second year, and they take off. So that's the thing to me is why not take the big swing if there's not that downside of we're stuck with this guy for 4 years. If you can turn it around, if it's that bad, why not go hard with it? And I'll tell you, the track record of Alabama offensive coordinators recently, Sarkisian out there at Texas, Lane Kiffin down there at is he at? Is it Ole Miss he's at? South Carolina, I think he's at. No, it's Ole Miss. He was down in Ole Miss as the head coach there. So
that sounds right.
There's a little bit of a track record of success those guys too. I know it's a new hire, but I like it.
All right. And he brought his buddy with him, Scott Huff, offensive line coach from Washington for, I think, the last 7 years. So not only did he coach this offensive line, which was considered by many to be the best offensive line in college football, he also coached some of the Chris Peterson offensive lines that protected Jake Browning, that included a player like Trey Adams, who at one point was considered a future top 5 pick, and then the injuries got him. And there were some other good players on those offensive lines too. I think, Jackson Kirkland might have been one of the guys on that offensive line.
And the center, the Nick kid. Nick something.
The guy who went to the Browns, I think. I know who you're talking about. He's like a backup on the Browns now. So real good offensive line stuff there. I look, the Ryan Grubb hire is way more impactful, but I like the Scott Huff hire more. He's going to be good. I'm really excited about that.
Love his track record. He's got 2 guys that I think are going to be drafted. I think Rosengardner's been a guy that everybody's been having at the back end of the draft who's going to rise up boards, I think, because of the fact that he can play both left and right tackle. So putting 2 guys in this draft alone, if not more so, just this draft. So, and you got the one thing that stands out with these guys and him taking the offensive line coach from Washington and his background at UW, you got to have guys that can move. That's going to stand out here. Well, it'd be nice if they can move thing of the past is gone. They have to be able to move out in space when you evaluate offensive linemen for the scheme moving forward.
Right. And hopefully the philosophy will be somewhat similar to the philosophy we're having under Waldron and Dickerson. So we don't have to reboot too much, which I don't think will be a big problem. I think that Scott Huff probably looks at guys like Charles Cross and goes, yeah, I want to coach that guy going forward.
He's an air raid. He comes from an air raid. Remember that with the thing? Cross's thing is air raid. Where does Abraham Lucas come from in college?
Air raid, yeah.
Air raid. So I mean, it's like pure as the day is long, so to speak, when it comes to both Lucas and Cross in this scheme.
And Bradford's super talented. I don't know if it ever manifests, but super.
He's athletic enough. It's going to be about that's Scott Huff's, toughest job, and he's got a great lump of clay there to work with that does fit to the scheme. But can you get it refined enough to make it workable?
Right. So, and we had one more hire, and this was earlier today, so we haven't had a ton of time to dig into it, but I did a little bit. It's Jake Peetz, new passing game coordinator, and I've said for a while, I think that passing game coordinator hire is important. Because when you have a guy with no NFL experience at OC, I think you want to offset that with a passing game coordinator who does have that experience. And Jake Peetz is very much that. He's been around in the NFL for a while. So any thoughts on him?
Well, the recent work is when I was LSU coordinator, was he there at the time they won the national title, and that offense was just basically beating the brakes off teams.
No,
And
that was
unfortunately, he wasn't.
Joe Brady. Yeah.
Yeah, so it wasn't him there. The work the Rams did last year was good. The past couple of years doing that, what he's done there with the Rams is good. Though you do go, how do I separate what's there with McVay and Stafford to what he's done? When it There's not a lot to me on this hire that I can pull from Brendan other than to say that what sits at the forefront of what the Hawks are doing is they're trying to take advantage of all areas right now of the modern era. Blitzing, stack fronts, spread concepts, an ability to run this, right? Like they're trying to do a lot of different things here, and I think within that is also going to be some of the forefront of what the Rams do at the head of what they do, which is that we're going to run out a lot of the same formations, but we're going to run out of all these little iterations out of it. And especially when it comes to passing game coordinators and setting up route concepts and flood zone concepts and getting defenses into that bind. He's been at McVay's knee here, I think, the past couple of years in understanding how important that is. Because there's a lot of those just little details on making those plays look exactly the same. That's at the head of it, is that I feel like a lot of these NFL teams, Brendan, when they go to different plays, there's all these tells across the board from the players. There was the old Trent Williams thing from a couple of years ago of him being in the stance when he's in a run play to a pass play. His stance was different. You could tell, but it can be other things too. It can be this guy does this when he goes in motion, and you can always pick that up. And McVay removes the tells of the offense prior to the snap. That's the most important thing. The flood zone concept stuff and how to go after coverage is kind of the secondary thing that he can bring. But that's the part where I think they're really probably trying to glean from, because that's at the head of what he does best.
Right. Well, one thing to consider, 2014, Jake Peetz was an offensive assistant with the, at the time, Redskins. And that was the God mode staff. Remember, they had McVay as OC. Kyle Shanahan was on that staff. Matt LaFleur. I think they had Bobby Slowick as well. That was the greatest coaching staff that never was. And so Jake Peetz works under Sean McVay for that year. And then a little less than 10 years later, McVay brings him back as a passing game specialist with the Rams. So you might look at that and say, hey, he liked what he saw enough to remember that guy and say, hey, I need a passing game specialist. Get me that guy. So I kind of like that. I also like the fact that he was an offensive assistant with the Crimson Tide in 2013, then left, and then he went back 5 years later as an offensive assistant. So they liked what they saw enough to say, let's go get that guy back. So I see things like that. I'm sorry, what was that?
He doesn't burn bridges, definitely, in that case. He's endears himself. That's a great point, because a lot about people willing to bring it back, as we've seen a lot of times those people like, get him out, don't ever have him come back, kind of. If you got that vibe, the teams are not looking to bring you back in.
Yeah, and also I think that he had a role in the development of Derek Carr when he was starting out with the Raiders. He was an assistant and became the assistant quarterback coach, and then he became the quarterback coach across those years where Derek Carr was really coming into his own. And, Derek Carr was not some super blue chipper coming into the NFL. He was a good prospect, but he wasn't even a first-round pick. So some impressive development there, because that 1 year, I think it was 2016, Derek Carr was in the MVP race until he broke his leg. So there was something good going on there.
Maybe playing some of his best ball of his career at that time, if you really break it all down to the bottom line, right?
And I feel like he's never really gotten back to the way he was playing then. I think that broken leg really kind of sapped something out of him that he's never been able to get back.
It happens, man. We think these guys with these injuries in the modern age can just bounce right back, no problem. But sometimes it's just you don't. What strikes me too with Carr is I think he has a little bit of that battered syndrome going on as a QB, right? All those years behind the Oakland line, getting kind of beat up, and it's like, watching him this year, there were some gun shy moments from him in the pocket where it was like he was dipping out on throws and trying to get a ball out just too quick on it rather than sitting in the pocket and trusting it. I think that's that accumulation effect that comes into quarterbacks after a good amount of time. Happened to his brother.
Right. So that's it on the coaching staff. But there's a couple other little things. Like, we hired an assistant special teams coach today. A couple other guys as well. We officially made it official that Carl Scott is coming back. So some stuff like that going on. But those are the big ones. Those are the four I really wanted to talk about.
All good hires, I think, Brendan. You'd agree, I think. And it's maybe not, some of these guys don't have as much track record, understandable, but some do where it's good. You got a guy like Grubb, having that guy from the Rams there who's got a little bit of the recent pro experience too, to be kind of like, okay, don't do this, don't do that, help him out like that. A little bit like Frazier's helping out McDonald, I think, in the same kind of way on his side of it. So I think real good hires. This is a good staff they put together. These are exciting minds, seem like smart guys, and listening to them talk today. All of them seemed like very bright guys. They were on it with their points. They have a vision. They seem to be aligned in that vision and what they're trying to do in their approach. And especially at the forefront seems to be, it's about maximizing what you have in your players. It's less about, I have my dogmatic scheme that we have to adhere to, and it's more about across the board offense and defense that we're trying to get the most out of what these players have inside of them.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So
Let me
that's
get to
about it
it.
for the coaching stuff. So let's take a look at some of these.
Super chats. This one's for you. I know he just membered up with me last night. So just at 12, thank you for becoming a member of Brendan Nelson's channel.
Thank you, just a 12.
Appreciate
Very
you for that.
nice. That's a
Just
username.
that is a
I
cool
like it.
username. I like the I have God thing going on there in the deal too. Nolan, thank you for the $5 donation. I appreciate you for that. Nolan, it's great to see you here tonight as well. Says Grub really impressed me. Clearly has been prepping for this move for a few years. Seems ready and up to the task. Loved hearing more than Petisms. Well said. Very well said.
Yeah. He had some specific things to talk about. I mean, some of the press conference was kind of just boilerplate stuff like it's so cool being able to go from the Huskies to the Seahawks, not even having to move out of the state, just having, your next job be right there. But there was some stuff he said that was pretty illuminating, I think.
I do too. And I think that what I did like about him, I think, is what Nolan does point to most, Brendan, because I do agree with you. A lot of the stuff, and we're going to have to wait on some of the detail stuff, right, when it comes to his kind of more specific points of plan. But the part that Nolan's talking about that I really liked is when he talked about, for instance, the connection with McDonald and going last year to the combine. And first off, going there to support Penix in preparation for the next year when he would be going to do draft, helping him out with that. But also going there, you think, to probably, like he was saying, have a vision in play for when I want to go up and I want to eventually get up and be the coach up there. I'd like to make some connections with guys, and those guys come together. So it's more like, as opposed to Brendan, somewhat of what we thought, which was that, okay, Grubb wants to leave the college level because the NIL monies and the NIL situations made everything a pain in the butt, and he didn't want to go to Alabama. And, no, he's actually had an eye on the prize of the pro level now for at least a year going back, and probably much further back than that. And that, to me, I don't know, it just makes me feel a little bit more, this is his dream to be here. He's not here because, well, this is where circumstances brought me. This is where my vision took me to want to be. And he was trying to execute that vision last year by going to the combine and making those kind of connections. I think a lot of other lazy coaches in that situation wouldn't have put out that kind of effort, Brendan, saying nothing of having Penix's back and supporting him in that way like he did too.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been working towards this for a while. It's not necessarily every day you're able to jump up to an OC position in the NFL without working your way up the positional coaches. But with how successful he's been at the college level, it is probably warranted in this case, right?
I think it is myself. Yeah. When you've done this kind of work, like you said, he did it overnight. This is not a thing where it took him 3 years to get this instilled in UW. And as you also said, was not taking over a full cabinet cupboard full of talent. That's like, oh, look what I've got to work with. It was kind of empty, but he did it in 1 year, turned it over in that very first season. Bam, you're going. And that to me speaks to the effect of that coach then on that program, when it's not a matter of it takes some time to get all the prime talent in here, especially at the college level. It becomes, no, I have such a good system. I have a good mind. I have a good understanding. I can do this job so well. I'll come in here and flip this right over. And as you said, he did it at Fresno State too. So that's why I just think he is legitimate in his rise here.
Absolutely.
Thank you, though, Nolan. Well said on your part, and appreciate the donation. Dad, thank you for the $10 as well. Appreciate you. Great to see in the head chat. Says, happy Pete was moved out. Love the McDonald hire, but the rest of the new coaching crew seems like a Bush League group. But I thought Carroll was going to be a bust. So what do I know? I mean,
I wasn't super high on Carroll when we got him either, because he did so poorly at his first couple of head coaching stints in the NFL. I just thought college was a different beast. I will admit that one. I didn't see him doing what he managed to do.
It's fair critiques at the time too, when you think about the fact he's players coach. That just seemed to fit best at college. Like, you can't do that. You'll end up letting them run the players end up running the show if you bring that mentality to the pro level. And I don't know where, I can't remember exactly where I was on it. If I was like, I just remember not like, I think it was more of I was just driven by I don't think Moore is going to be the guy. That's just something. Yeah. As long as we get off of this, we'll be okay, on it. I think when it comes, well, you addressed the question first on this one with the heart of it.
Yeah. I mean, I'll grant that some of these hires are unconventional. Like Ryan Grubb is unconventional. I think that typically speaking, in this circumstance where you have a first-time head coach in the NFL, you are thinking about getting somebody like a Frank Reich, somebody with experience, somebody who's play called before at the NFL level. Even somebody like Chip Kelly would have been a little more boilerplate than what we got with Grubb. But he's not bad. Like, don't think for 1 second that Ryan Grubb is a bad hire. This is the number one college offensive play caller in the country right now. Like, who's better? No one. I don't even know who else is in the conversation with Grubb. That doesn't mean it's going to work. That doesn't mean there isn't risk here. But I definitely don't view Grubb as just some guy we had to get because everybody else was gone.
No, I don't either. And I'm not still sure that Frank Reich really wanted, when thinking about that situation, Brendan, I really don't think, as evidenced by the fact he's still not been announced as an offensive coordinator anywhere right now. And I have a feeling that he's going to take the year off. I think he's had to bounce around a couple times, and I just don't know if that was an option. And my point on that being is I don't know that there was really a great option out as an OC out on the market. You can get known quantity versus unknown, or as Brendan said, unconventional versus conventional. But that doesn't mean bad going one of those two different ways. And when I did look at the open market of guys out there, Eric Bieniemy, Chip Kelly, well, I mean, they wouldn't have been bad hires, but would they be significantly better hires just even on the surface of it than a guy like Grubb? I don't know. I'm not so sure on that. And when it comes to the rest of the staff, the DC was going to be unimportant. I certainly think that Codad, when it comes to Leslie Frazier, there's nothing Bush League about Leslie Frazier. That's a Super Bowl champion, both as a player and a coach, and he's been in this league for years. And even in his recent stints, you have seen the effect he's had on the coaching staff and the Bills versus when he then left and where that Bills defense went. So he's fantastic hire. But I think when it comes to the other DC, that was going to make it hard with Frazier coming in and bringing in the DC. He's the guy now, the third in that crew, and he doesn't even get to call the plays. You were not going to attract a real vibrant, great hire at the DC, given those factors at play. Kind of like Coach Carroll was never going to bring in, for instance, the great prime OC. We know that in retrospect because of the fact that he was going to have a big effect on the offense and a big finger in that particular pie and what he was telling them to do. This isn't a bad thing, the way we've set it up. It does means you can't go to everybody and knock on every door because people are going to go, look, no, what's the benefit to me? I got to sit third rung and be named the DC. It's like, that's not attractive for me. But they've gone for upside, Codad. That's the nice thing here to me. They're untested, unconventional, but you also are seeking upside. You're not going for the untested guys who don't seem to have a lot to them. You're going for guys who seem to have that prospect, bright future, high ceiling kind of coaching potential pedigree to them. And that's why I do like these hires.
Right. And Huff, I mean, Washington's offensive line won the award for best OL in the country last year. So you're also probably getting the best offensive line coach in college football as well. So I know it's college football. I know it's a different game. I know not everything is going to translate, but that's what Jake Peetz is for. He's here to help translate some of that stuff because he has NFL experience. So I'm digging it. Yeah.
Me too, man. But we'll see how they go, Codad. And the nice thing is, if they are not the greatest hires, you're not stuck with them for years and years and years. It's something that can get itself fixed if you let it play out a little bit. So we'll just have to see how it goes. Appreciate the donation though, Codad. Thank you so much, man. Null Hypothesis, thank you for the $10 donation. He says, you guys are the best Seahawks content on the web, and I just want to show some support. Well, that is very kind of you, Null. Thank you. He says, go Hawks. P.S. Any plans to do a triple stream with KJ all day in the future?
Triple stream would be hard, man. It's like those, it's like on election night when you watch like CNN or something and they've got like 16 people in the boxes and they're all talking over each other. Like at a certain point, it's tough.
It is. It does get a little difficult with it. I think we'd be open to doing it. But again, too, I think KJ is kind of rolling, doing his thing with it. I've reached out to KJ at times on Twitter and not gotten a response back. So I've tried to present it out to him on it. I don't know if he's really interested in doing that or just kind of doing his thing, which I totally would get. But definitely, I think I'm open to doing it if he's open to doing it. Just got to get him on board with it, I suppose.
Yeah. Seems like he's open to doing some pretty fun stuff.
I think he will, and that's kind of the space of this. So I'll try to reach out again to him, Noel, and see if we can get a response back from him. But I would love to do it. Love to talk. We might have a bunch of questions I'd love to ask, man, and just to pick his brain. I don't know if he'd be willing to answer all of them, but I'd ask him.
Absolutely.
But, Noel, you're awesome, man. Thank you for the don't know. Appreciate the support. Uppo coming in with a $20 donation. Uppo, man, thank you for the big don't know. Says, huge Mike McDonald fan, but not the other coaches. But we'll never know what the alternatives said in the interviews. I need every Friday off to attend QAnon meetings, or I'm proud of Jamal for doubling down. So I trust John.
Yeah, that is kind of the factor that we can never know about, right? We don't know how these interviews went. Like, it's come out over the last couple weeks, and I think we can kind of safely assume this because we're hearing it from some other teams as well that Ben Johnson's didn't not interview well, and that's part of the reason why he stayed in Detroit. He doesn't seem to have that head coaching X factor, kind of like Nathaniel Hackett didn't.
Yeah, that's it. That is what we were hearing initially. We're hearing that more now. Absolutely. And I don't know, Brendan, do you feel like that we're really looking at, when we look at these coaching hires that are there, was there really even that many guys out there that were other sparkling alternatives? I mean, say nothing of the DC or OC, but just we're talking about these kind of coaches. What else was out there that you were going to go, grab or pluck from where, seems a little bit lean on some of the options out there in certain respects.
You mean for like a head coach?
No, just for some of these other, because he's saying he's a huge Mike McDonald fan, but he's saying the alternative said in the interviews. Oh, okay. No, you're speaking of the head coach. I misread your question. So that's my bad. I was thinking he was meaning on the other one. But yeah, we don't know. We don't know, man. And I can pretty much, I think Ben definitely probably didn't have a good interview. They pivoted forward to Mike McDonald.
Yeah, they keep saying that like Bieniemy doesn't know how to interview, like he never has a good interview, which is why the league is basically given up on him at this point. It's hard to factor in things like that. People were saying that Vrabel didn't get a job because he's too big and these GMs are like scared of him.
I was hearing that too. Like they were worried he was going to try to physically intimidate him to get him to do what he wanted. And I was like, what has gone on at Tennessee? That's such a random. There's big head coaches. I've never heard of a head coach that was like, he's just so intimidating. I mean, we've had the Dickas come through the league. We've had I've never heard it ever mentioned like that. That was so out of left field to me, man, when I heard that about Vrabel.
Yeah. What is Vrabel going to do this year, man? I mean, Andy Reid's not retiring. He can't even take the Kansas City job. What is he going to do?
This becomes back to the Niners situation that makes it interesting, because the Niners, of course, are busy right now, screwing themselves over a bit, especially I think firing Wilkes, because now they have to get the untested guy that'll be the yes man for Shanahan, which is that ain't gonna work. Or they'll go for something wild like a Vrabel, but then now you're going back to, you don't want to blitz. The whole point of you firing Wilkes was because you didn't like blitzing. Yeah. Well, Vrabel's going to want to blitz.
Yeah, I got a little prediction with that Niners thing. I think they're getting Staley.
Oh.
The only issue is you would have to transition over to a 4-3 probably. Or excuse me, 3-4. You'd have to transition to the 3-4.
Yeah.
But I think Staley might actually be what they end up going with here, because clearly they want somebody who's going to be good now, and Staley's done enough recently to show he'll probably be good quickly.
And they've stayed to that scheme and system so hard through. I mean, they've gone through 3 defensive coordinators and have stayed with that same wide 9 system. That's the thing for me, is I'm like, I could see him doing that, but that's the part where I think they've gotten themselves in the pickle with the situation, is because now you're going to push to do something different, and everything you've been doing so far is working. This would be the definition to me of breaking something that's working. A little bit in
there. Well, it's all Steve Wilkes' fault that he couldn't stop maybe the greatest quarterback of all time in the Super Bowl. That's easy to do. It's going to be easy to find somebody who can do that.
Very, very simple scapegoat in this one. And I don't think doesn't add up to me that that was on him or that he should have been fired. I thought he did a fine job for them. You knew you probably weren't going to give the exact same performance from the last DC, who had the number 1 defense basically in the league or close to. So it's like a tiny little itty bitty dip down, and it's like, get out of here. It's like, how about you call the right call, heads or tails, and you take the ball next overtime, coach, huh? How about that?
Yeah, they could get Carroll. Some Niners fans are actually talking about them getting Carroll as DC.
Please do it. Please do it. Please do that, San Francisco. Swear, please do it. Would you? How scared are you going to be about going against Coach Carroll defense?
I'm really excited to see Fred Warner drop into zones on every single play, just right in the middle of the field, watching wide receivers run right past him.
100%. I hope to God they do, Brendan. I would laugh my ass off. And Carroll's like, I'm going to show them. I'm like, yeah, we'll see. We'll see on that one. But hey, at least Shanahan won't have to worry about it blitzing too much, right?
Yeah, that's true.
That's the big issue, right? With Wilkes, blitz too much. You ain't getting that with Carroll. So,
yeah, I mean, it was weird that he blitzed as much as he did when he's got that amazing front 4, but you're not going to have that front four anymore. They're apparently cutting Armstead. I don't think they can keep Chase Young. Like, you're going to need to start blitzing a little bit more, probably.
Probably. And that's what you knew you were getting with Wilkes with some of his background. I mean, he had a league year one year. I think he almost blitzed like just about 50% of the time when he was been a defensive coordinator before in the past. So he's going to blitz. That's what you knew you were getting. And that's why that hire was a little bit strange, where it's more of like, well, this guy did good at Carolina. Let's bring him in. Versus, does this guy run the system we want to run? Does he do what we want to do? No. And that causes the issue. But I think they're in a pickle, Brendan, right now. And it's between going for some weird outside the box one, changing the defense, or just going for that yes man that's internally in there already that you have to roll the dice and hope and pray he's going to be able to ascend to the position and hold on and make it work.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's a little dark. Upo, man, thank you for the $20 drop, brother. Very kind of you. Garth Knight with the $5 donation. Thank you, Garth. It says, fellas, Geno Smith's arm talent is being questioned in the chat by my eyes. He's in the top quarter of the league in that respect.
Yeah,
a
lot of things get questioned about Geno Smith that don't make a lot of sense to me. I got to be honest.
Yeah, it's been a subject for me, Brendan, that's been just hammered in my chat on my live stream shows. It's when I've kind of reached to my end to my point on where it's like, man, I don't know much more what I can talk about with him that in this conversation with it. There are folks that are out on Geno, man, in the fan base, and they are out. There's no sense of getting him in. There's no argument to bring him in. They are definitely passionately out. The arm strength of Geno is, yes, in the top third of this league. Indeed it is. Is he in the top third from an arm strength standpoint? Yeah, he is. That's why last year, the year before, he set the league, he had the most big time throws in the league. He didn't accomplish that with a powder puff arm. He accomplished that because he could put it in a short spot. Think back to just that Saints game alone, rolling to his left, hitting Noah Fant for a 25-yard completion. Not many quarterbacks can get that with that to the left, get that kind of arm velocity on the ball. Or the two Lockett throws in that game alone down the seam, 50 yards down the field to a spot in between sometimes triple coverage in one place. Yeah, he's got the arm strength and definitely.
Yeah. And we never had the offensive line last year for him to do that. So we didn't get to see as much of it in 2023. Trust me, his arm did not fall off between 2022 and 2023.
Nope. That's to Brendan's point. You need to have pass protection so for the 7-step drops to work, for the long developing plays, for the deep plays. It doesn't happen on a 3-step drop that he just launches it off his back foot and goes, okay, I'll just put a lot of air under this. No, you've got to get down to the 7 steps. You got to get that extra second of beat that the lineman got to hold up. And as we saw with the pass protection, that wasn't happening this year. But that's part of the optimism for the future, is that you get that on point, and with it, you'll get those big time throws back, and with it, you'll see the best Geno.
Yeah, definitely.
But thank you, Garth. I appreciate that donation, and well spotted on your part. Zen Lunatic, thank you for the $5 donation. He says, speaking of new hires, ESPN is reporting that we hired Frisman Jackson as wide receiver coach. Was wide receiver coach from Pittsburgh. Frisman. Pittsburgh knows their receivers, right?
Maybe more than any other team out there when you consider how quickly they've been able to cycle through them in recent years, right?
Yeah. It's one of those positions for me with the Steelers. When I think of Steelers, I think of wide receivers and linebackers. Linebackers, then receivers, really. They come first. But I think they've just got a rich history when you go through the time and thinking about them of always having, if not star receiver guys out there like an Antonio Brown, there's always a Hines Ward. There's always Plaxico Burress coming through there. There's always, strong receivers. George Pickens, Deontay Washington right now. They do a good job, it seems like, in developing those guys. So bringing him in for that role, it seems like Sanjay Lal, that was our previous guy, right?
Yeah.
He was well-respected in the locker room, so big shoes to fill there. But he seemed like a pretty good hire, Zen Lunatic.
Yeah, from what I know, seems pretty good. I mean, some of these, maybe he's doing something to make these Pittsburgh receivers lose their mind, because it seems like that's happening quite a bit lately. You got the Chase Claypool stuff. His career is basically in the tank now. I don't know what's going on with him, but he may as well retire, I feel like. I don't think anybody's going to want to touch him. Pickens has got some stuff, the AB stuff, obviously. Maybe there's something there. I don't know. Maybe he's playing the bongos on their head after practice every day, and they got this severe version of CTE. I don't know, but other than that, he's doing great.
I think Pickens just gets tired of, he's got Pickett throwing him the ball through his first 2 years. He knows he's probably one of the best receivers from a talent standpoint in this league, and he doesn't get used because his quarterback can't throw the ball. That's got to be mighty frustrating, especially once you've gone through it for a couple of years. And with Chase, it's just that, he just throttled it back from the second he became a pro. I mean, it was like, do all this work to become a pro, and then I'm chilling. at that point. And hey, it's hard to predict that kind of behavior. It's like that Isaiah Wilson guy, remember, from Georgia, the
Yeah.
tackle. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
they just go based on what you heard with him. Remember that there was no pre-draft red flags on the guy or anything that was indicative that there was going to be a problem with him. And then right after he's drafted, it's off the rails they went.
Yeah, he made a bet in elementary school that he could make it into the NFL, but he didn't actually want to, but he wanted to win the bet.
You're right. It was big money on the bet. There was a lot right on that bet. So, but thank you for the update, Zen Lunatic, and we'll look a little bit more offline in that Frizz Jackson and get a little bit better feel. But that's Pittsburgh does a good job with the receivers. They know how to train that positions like edge rushers, and Pittsburgh knows how to train edge rushers. It's a conveyor belt of line that comes through there through years.
Oh yeah.
Noel Hypothesis with another $5 dono. Thank you, Noel, for that donation. He says, if we have the option to draft Zerzan Newton, even with a slight trade down, would you still opt to keep Williams?
Well, you're going to have to make the decision on Williams before the draft, well before the draft. So you don't have the luxury of knowing if you're going to get Zerzan before you sign Leonard Williams. So it doesn't really work like this. In theory, I mean, that's significant money saved. And you are getting a player who I do think fairly highly of in Zerzan Newton. So I guess, but that's not a realistic scenario, right? You're going to have no idea if Newton's going to be there at 16 when you make the call on Leonard.
You don't. I mean, it's just hard to predict right now. It'll get closer in another month, I guess, once we have the combine go down, and there'll be a little bit more clarity at that point. But you, like Brendan said, no, you'll have to make this call beforehand rather than reverse it a little bit, like you're advocating for potentially trying to do. If I was to look at this and kind of bottom line this, I see Leonard Williams as an 8.9 player. I see Newton's upside as sort of an 8.3, right? Mm-hmm. Leonard Williams on the upside of a B. Newton in the kind of the B minus grade is where he'll be as a player to me. So is that enough worthwhile to me to not sign Williams and to hunker down in on Zerzan Newton? Not really enough for me to do that myself. I think that Williams gives you that. That's why the second round pick came into play with Williams. That's why you had to do what you did, because they're hard to find, these talent of defensive tackles. And I'm not saying Williams is remember, it's 8.9, right, Brendan? So I'm not saying like I'd have Aaron Donald at like a 9.7, or whatever, right? So there's plenty of guys that have a well above Leonard. It's just that these are hard to find guys that are this good, and you can find a lot of guys in the B minus range if you want to try to look down there, I think.
Yeah, you seem a little lower on Newton than a lot of people have been lately. A lot of people are starting to really get hyped on Newton because he's the only really good defensive lineman in this draft more than anything.
Bingo. That's what I've done a bunch of back and forth on him. I liked him initially, then it kind of soured, got a little back. The latest film I've gone back and watched from this past year is it flashes, it's there, but it's not enough for me to go, I got to jump on this. This is something that I feel like, and especially this draft, Brendan, too, because there's a lot of those kind of B minus 3 techs in this draft. The majority of those second round graded defensive tackles, let's just go through it. DeFondre Sweat might be a first, but second round, Dorless, Tyler Davis, Leonard Taylor, Dwayne Carter, Michael Hall Jr., Chris Jenkins, Braden Fisk. All of these guys are around the second to third round range, and all of those guys are 3 techs. So it's like Zerzan's got to be a real good 3 tech for me above those other options to go and grab him then at 16. And I just don't think he has that caliber of play in him necessarily. I can see the flashes, but I just don't think it's that degree.
Right. I can definitely see that. Makes sense to me.
He's a good player though, no, don't get me wrong. And I still do have him, I think, as number 1 DT on my board, but just
he almost has to be. I mean,
yeah, it's not a great draft for the upper end defensive tackles. And both Cansey and Carter were better last year as prospects. Thank you, Snail, for the $2 donation. Hawks need to target Max Borghi to replace Dallas. DJ Dallas, that is.
Yeah. I kind of liked Borghi a couple of years ago. I remember him.
He was fun. Poor man's Christian McCaffrey.
He's like Christian McCaffrey if Christian McCaffrey broke both of his legs but was almost healed from it, and like he was still wearing the braces.
He's like Christian McCaffrey if Christian McCaffrey was a dive bar.
Yeah, Christian McCaffrey if he was wearing the Forrest Gump leg braces.
There you go. Yeah. Christian McCaffrey, but not the new kind of cups, the old kind of cups that took over your whole Johnson area and you couldn't run with them.
Yeah. He's in the XFL. He was in the XFL. I don't know where he is now, but he's still out there, still moving his arms and legs in the general way in which football players do.
Yep. And we'll probably learn a little bit about what the team thinks about McIntosh a bit on this and how much, if they show any aggression to targeting a running back. I would think ideally from this, Brendan, their standpoint would be to find a guy more in the undrafted. You find the best undrafted rookie free agent. And you're like, look, you're going to have the guaranteed spot here as the 4. Whereas those guys don't usually have very many guarantees as undrafted rookie free agents, and then put the rest of your draft to other areas, or take a guy like 7th roundish area, but not to put a lot of assets into thereof because you're 3 stacked deep. But we do need to get another one.
Gore Jr.
Frank Gore Jr. I'm with it. Do you go or I like to get out of Ohio State too as a later round guy. The Mayan Williams, is that what it is, or Sanders? I get these guys confused. It's the kid, the backup at Ohio State. He's got a little bit of Frank Gore to him too. His game a little bit. He'd be fun.
Yeah, the McCaffrey kid in this year's draft, is he a receiver or a running back?
He's a receiver.
Oh,
he's built, and he's built a little more. He's built like the elder McCaffrey, whereas the younger McCaffrey doesn't have anywhere near the same build or gait of his father.
Okay,
it's that upright, upright running style.
Right.
He's a good player though.
Yeah.
Thank you though, Snail, for the donation and showing your Cougar love subtly in the chat. I love that. Always doing that. Appreciate everybody on the donos, by the way, as well. Thank you so much for all those. Let's, I guess we're an hour in. Let's get to the main course meal here of the show here today, which is looking at the internal free agents here and who we should hire. What do we got to preface on this, Brendan, and setting the stage for the internal free agents, though?
All right. So I have here a list of all upcoming Seahawks free agents, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these are guys who are going to be free to leave. Well, there are a few exceptions. We've got a few restricted here, a few exclusive rights free agents, but we have a list here of everybody who could be available in the offseason if the team does not do something. They have to sign them, they have to tag them, they have to tender them, they have to do something or else they're going to go, basically is the idea. Now, last week's show, we already talked about the players that we would let go or restructure or extend to create this cap space. Because right now we don't have any. Right now we've got negative cap space, but easy to take care of. No problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. So what I was thinking we would do in this show was we would take turns going back and forth on these players. I'll name the player. I have the list here sorted by value of their last contract. One player, I'll go first, offer my prediction of what kind of contract it's going to take to get them. And then I'll say whether or not I would do that. And then you say what you think it's going to be, whether or not you would do it. And then maybe we can talk about it for a minute. And then the next player, you would go first. And then I would offer up my prediction. And then we go back and forth on that one.
Sounds good.
Just take turns. That way one person can't completely steer the conversation, right?
I feel you. No, that works for me.
Because when you hear what one guy has to say, it can't help but get into your mind a little bit and kind of impact what you might want to say. It's a thing that happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do they call that? Social engineering?
Yeah. Or there's the one other term. I don't know. There's a fancy term for it.
Yeah. Okay. So you cool if I lead?
Yeah. Fire away.
All right. So this first guy here is the big one. This is the big ticket item for this offseason. It is Leonard Williams, Big Cat, the guy we traded for last year. It's going to be really hard to not bring him back. If we don't bring him back, that hurts.
Oh, it would be, you lose the second round pick that you gave up for nothing, basically, at that point, or you're hoping you're getting some compensatory, which then means you're limited in free agency to go out there and sign tier 1 free agents, which isn't good either.
Mm-hmm. So because of that, he has us over a little bit of a barrel. He does. Let's just be real here. Sure. Also, I think you've said we cannot tag him, right?
It'd be his 3rd time being tagged, so it goes 20% on top of the tag rate.
Right. So tagging him would be hard. Not impossible. You could kind of loom it over him, but it would be really uncomfortable to actually do it. So my prediction is 3 years. I don't think he's getting 4 because he's 30 now. He's getting older. He's getting up there. I don't think he's getting no 4-year deal. I say 3 years. The money I landed on after really thinking about it and looking at some of these other contracts, I went with 50. That's a little bit less than what Dre'mont got last year, which makes sense because he's much older than Dre'mont was, but he's also a better player than Dre'mont by a pretty wide margin. That comes out to about just shy of 17 million a year. I think that kind of factors in the fact that we don't really have much leverage over him because we can't tag him and we traded for him. I do think he'll be able to ask for a little bit more, but I do think you're looking at 3 years, 50 million, and I would be willing to do that. I'm willing to do it.
Yeah, I think that we got to be careful when the money we spend here off the rip, being that even with the money we cleared last week, some of this is also being informed by the what you and my intentions will be when it comes to free agency and how active we're going to want to be for that. I know that's a show for another time, but that's definitely impacting some of the outlook here as well. I had the contract at a little lower rate, but let's not get caught up in that well too much. I think if it's between where I have it at more of like 44, 45 million on a 3-year deal to where you have it at 50, it's really kind of what's the difference at the end of the day. I do think that you have to do this deal, not have to do this deal, but I would highly recommend doing this deal. Studying the defensive tackles in recent years, Brendan, there's a good collection of good ones in the league. There actually is, but they are held on to and they are cherished like the first child, like the first child in royalty, like the first male child in royalty. They're cherished like that on these teams. They get signed, they get made to extensions, they get signed early on after 3 years, they get all the money in the world, team after team after team after team. So if we don't go this route, you're not finding as talented a 3-tech in this particular draft, and you don't really have much of a hope in the future of locating that guy necessarily in future drafts because they're so hard to get your hands on. So yeah, I'm rolling with this one. It's an easy peasy one, and I have no issues in doing it. It's money well spent.
Yeah. If the negotiations get difficult and he pushes up to like 55, that's when I would start to go, I don't think I can do this. 60, I'm going to have to be like, no, sorry.
I'm not doing 20. I'm not doing 20 a year. I'm even struggling to get to the spot you're at that high ground you were at. So if you go even beyond them, I've got to go. There is a no-go territory here. It's got to make, this has got to make some sense, but, to your point as well, he may have that on the open market. That there's a couple teams I think got $80 million in cap space. A few others got 70 and 60 million, and so there might be the money out there for those teams to compete in that way.
Yeah, hopefully Chris Jones is out there to distract everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Notices, Leonard.
They're all just chomping at the bit for him, so Leonard just becomes the guy ignored, or Wilkins for that matter. If he gets, he'll probably get franchised.
Yeah, it's like the media day before the playoff game with the Texas Longhorns, where all the media guys are gathered around Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers is just sitting over there and there's nobody there.
Yeah, he's just sad face. One little child comes up. He's like, "Do you got any candy?"
Poor guy.
Yeah, poor Quinn. That's why I went back to school to stick at the Arch. He's like, "Oh yeah, you think you're starting next year? No, you're not."
Yeah, and Ewers will probably be a first-round pick next year. The QB class next year is kind of crappy.
Could be. Definitely has a good chance. And Sark's going to put him into some good positions to let him let it rip. So possible.
All right. So Leonard Williams, 3 years, 15 to 17 million a year. We're both pretty on board in that area. We're both going to live with it. And we know that last year is probably going to be kind of brutal, but that's the cost you pay when you have these good players.
It is indeed. It will be a bit expensive, but I do think you should try to lower down the first year cap hit as far as you can, and they're going to have to, I think, in certain realms. But this is, again, I think money they'll be okay spending. Let's also understand too, with the defensive tackle position, it tends to be one where we have a track record of guys still playing at a very good level. I mean, hell, Al Woods was 35 and our best lineman 1 year down there, and so these guys can play into their early 30s and still play at a very, very high level.
All right, so the next guy, you can take the lead on this one. Our second highest paid player that's an outgoing free agent from 2023, Bobby Wagner. Wagner. And this one's weird. I know this one's weird because this guy's made over $100 million in his career. So his priorities might be a little bit different, but how do you see this one playing out?
Well, I think that you got to give him, I think he made like 7 million last year, 6-7 million, 1 year deal. I think this is a 1 year deal at a time. I would like to get it into like a 2 year, $16 million deal and lower down the first year hit if I could. Not even with the intention of we got to necessarily have him come back next year, but just that you can get the first year. One thing that stands out to me in this, Brendan, especially with this first deal that we've done, like let's say with Leonard, that chops off about 10 million off that 42 million off the rip. And then you've got 9 million that's due to, at least by sports tracks nature, is supposed to then go to the draft. So now there goes 19 million off the 42. Then you've got 6 million that got to go to the reserve. So now we're 25 off the 42. And so you're going to have to get creative in some of these deals to fit anything else in as we go through on this a little bit, because there just isn't as much money as it might look on the surface with that 40 million. But I'd go a 1 year, $8 million deal, or a 2 year 16, and then move the money around a little bit if I could. I think you've got to address both linebacker positions as it is right now. I think that he is a really great bang for buck option. Would you maybe like to get a little more athletic, faster linebacker in there? Maybe long-term. Yeah. But he also gives you the insurance, Brendan, where you're not driven to have to reach for need in the draft and grabbing 2 middle linebackers or a Mike and a Will, rather giving you the opportunity to really, at least have one of those positions solidified so that you just feel more comfortable in staying in a value-based standpoint going into the draft. And the free agents on the market for the middle linebacker position, that'll be again for another show we talk about, but I just don't think you're going to have the money, as I'm talking about, to get the guys like Queen fit in. And so we come back to getting some bang for the buck, getting some steady, getting the veteran leadership and his presence and his understanding. It can't hurt in implementing this scheme across the board, as well as far as just in the background part of this process.
Mm-hmm. All right. I have a little bit of a bold prediction here with Wagner. I don't think the money is a big thing for him anymore. And I think that's why he took the deal that he took with us last year in the first place. Because that deal was 5.5 with incentives.
Yeah.
And that was coming off a year he played in LA where he played really good. He had a great season. I think he made all-pro second team.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. He was solid.
So I don't think the money's a big thing. I think he just wants to play a place that he wants to play. And maybe now that we've completely blown up our coaching staff, he doesn't even want to be here that much. I don't know. I got no idea. Who knows what's running through his mind? But I think that financially, if you tried to bring him back and he's on board, you could probably do like 1 year, 5 million with some incentives. And I think he'd be okay with that. I don't get the sense that money's a big thing to him anymore. He's made his money, $100 million in NFL salary. I think he'd be okay doing that. And I'd be willing to do that for sure, because we have such a hole at that spot. Now, it would not shock me if McDonald says, I can't use a guy that slow in my defense. I want to turn the page. And, I can completely understand that. I empathize completely, but hard for me to believe you can't find a way to make Bobby be an impactful, positive part of your defense if you're a good defensive coach in this league.
That's right, because there's still some things he does very well. And it's just about leaning in those things. You mentioned the Rams. One reason they got the year out of him is they used him in such a different approach to the way that we used Bobby last year. And that's a big part of getting, the best out of Bobby at this point in time in his career. So I think McDonald would better seek to emulate that. That's what he's talked about being at the root of his philosophy, is maximizing what the player does well rather than I need you to play single high safety as a middle linebacker. Okay, he had Roquan play that at times last year, Brendan. Roquan would drop back to the center field safeties. But that's not necessarily something that he's going to have done with his scheme. It's going to be able to be molded around the players. And you have the need here. This fits up on a lot of different points for me. And he's like having a coach on the field in a lot of ways. I just think Bobby brings a lot of value beyond just also being a real productive player for the bang for buck factor. I mean, I'm seeing now Queen's going to be up projected at $18.5 million per year.
Oh yeah.
And you're getting Bobby on a 1 year, $5.5 to $7 million, $8 million deal. It's like, dude, I don't know. Bobby's not half the player of Patrick Queen.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. And look, if we had a little bit more going on at the position, I would probably say no, but in this circumstance, I don't think you can completely turn over the middle linebacker room in one offseason. You got to have something from last year. So I prefer it to be this.
Me too. Mm-hmm. Me as well.
All right. So next up, we're going to do next guy here for me would be Drew Lock.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll lead off on this one. And this one, there needs to be a little bit of nuance here because there's two scenarios. You bring him back as a backup or you bring him back as a nominal starter. Now that scenario is a lot less likely because as of 4 hours from now, Geno Smith's contract becomes basically fully guaranteed. Could still trade him, but I think it's unlikely. I think Geno's going to be your quarterback in 2024. That's very likely to be the case. And if you bring back Drew Lock, although I will say this, a lot of nice things said about Drew Lock by this new coaching staff so far. You notice?
They seem to be indicating that they're going to bring him back. I'm a little bit wondering how you're going to pull this off if you're Schneider and his perspective on this, given the cap situation where it is at. Because it's ain't where it was at last year, and Gino's cap hit's gone from 10 to 31. You could fit Drew's cap, but he's going to cost $5 million. How do you fit that into this cap? I don't know.
Right. So what I wrote down was if Drew Lock comes back as a backup, I said 1 year, $6 million, because last year he got $4 million and then he actually played. So he's going to want more, a little bit more. Maybe it would be like 5 million, like you said, but I said 1 year, 6. And then I said, if you bring him in as the starter, like you do the Gino trade, he'd want more. Or maybe he'd want incentives that he would obviously meet, like Gino did that first year.
Sure.
So in that case, I said 1 year, 10 million. And you'd have to assume he'd hit the incentives. They're probably easy incentives. And in both cases, I'm kind of a no. I just feel like I can spend 10% of that on a rookie quarterback and not feel that different about things.
I feel the same way about it, and so I'm likewise in the state of mind with this, where I just say I'm just a no here on my standpoint with this. I don't want to spend the $5 million for him as a backup. Quite frankly, I'd rather go get a good, legitimate player out there at that position, and I think that that's just too high of a cost to have to pay. So I'm a no. I'm out on doing that. Even if you move Gino, I don't want to move. I don't know. Even if you move Gino, I don't know if I'd be in on it, really, to be honest with you, because I just think at that point, you're moving Gino. Why not just take it all down the foundations at that point? I know there's some Seahawks fans advocating for that. I'm okay for doing that if we want to do it, but then go whole hog in that direction. Don't partial it that if you're going to do that. And bringing back in Drew on that would not be a full move on that to me, because then you're just tapping the cap out in a year you're not really trying to compete anyway. What's the point of that? Especially if the look is to try to turn towards like a number 1, 2, 3 overall pick so you can get your quarterback next year.
Right. I mean, that Eagles game last year bothers me, which I know is a weird thing to say because we won that game, but the training wheels on Drew Lock in that game were next level. Like we were afraid to let him do anything. Like I can get, I could get some quarterback in the 7th round this year and have a quarterback that I have no trust in on my roster for 10% of the price of Drew Lock. So if you don't trust him, why are you giving him $6 million? I don't know. I'm not feeling it. I understand that Drew Lock has way more talent than some of these quarterbacks you can get in the 6th round, the 7th round UDFA, but it doesn't matter if you're just going to protect him like that every time he gets to go out there.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, if I'm paying that kind of price, I should be getting upper level backup per production, right? Like you come in, I can run my offense fully whole hog. You're not expected to play as good as the starter, but I'm not, like you say, putting training wheels on the offense like I would have to tend to do with a typical backup quarterback. And the fact that they did that through that game, 4.5 yards per average attempt through most of that game, just speaks to, I think, a little bit of that. Like, and the trust adds up, right? Because every other time we've had him out on the football field, the turnovers come back into play when they don't have the training wheels on him. And that's, again, we come back to just not worth to me the expenditure to make that price. If I was getting upper level play at backup, I'd do it, but it just ain't giving you that.
Yeah, go get Jacoby Brissett. That guy's actually pretty good, and it's not going to be that much more, I don't think.
No, it wouldn't. And I'm with you. If it's a vet minimum backup at $2 million, or I'm going to pay $5 million upwards with the incentives to 10, it's like, well, I know I don't want to do that.
Yeah, or just go get Holton Allers back and pray Gino never gets hurt, like for even cheaper than $2 million.
Yeah, I think that's there's a variety of ways you can do, and there's tends to be you can get a quality backup without to me having to pay $10 million for it. I know they can kind of sometimes cost a lot, the Chase Daniels types, but just there's guys you can find out there that can make it work at a lower cost.
All right, so we're both a no on Drew Lock, whatever the price point is. If we're wrong about the price point and he would actually come back for like $2 million, that's different. I would do that, but I don't think I'm wrong. I think he's going to want more than he got last year.
Agreed. I think he's going to want more, and I just think it gets to a point of it's like the Williams thing gets to a cost where it's like, that's a little too much. And I can't understand enough when running through the numbers. I'm sure you saw the same thing. Things get really tight here really fast as far as the numbers go on the cap space. We are I think we're like 28th right now going into this offseason or something like that. So we've got to maximize this cap. We can't just go, let's just blow $5 million on the backup quarterback. We've got the room to do that. Like, no, you don't really, not really.
Yeah. Okay. Next up, you're going to lead with this one. It is Noah Fant.
Noah Fant, productive receiver throughout every year of his career in this league. Former top 17 first round pick. He's been always up around 400 or 500 yards every year of his career. I think this year he's a little bit short. When they did seem to target him, he was there able to make big plays. He had some yak moments this year where he was able to, stretch the field after the catch and really provide a boon for you there. Feels like the team never really quite understood how to best really utilize him. But then again, it never really felt like the Broncos really best knew how to utilize him. Because of that production in his baseline, Brendan, I'm estimating that he's going to get somewhere between 10 to 12 million per year, maybe on like a 3-year deal, maybe a 4-year deal. I don't think that he is a particularly good blocker. I think that he's had times where he's held up decently in that realm, but I think he's been, for lack of a better word, he's been your typical H block, poor blocker that you see from that position when it's not an inline guy. And so to pay 10 to 12 million a year when my cap is so stretched thin as it is, Brendan, I can't see why there would be any feasible reason to make this deal. I wouldn't even do it if you were releasing off Disley in order to accommodate this contract. I would rather have Disley. In my opinion, he's a better overall, more complete player. And from the tight end position in this time and day and age, I need a complete skill set. I don't need just the pass catcher. I need the guy that can do all of the other stuff too.
Yeah, we're probably going to heavy 11 personnel this season.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine so. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think he gets on the open market, Fant?
10 to 12 million on a 3-year deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I put 3 years, 39. So that's 13 mil a year. If you look at what these other tight ends are getting, I think that's actually very reasonable. I don't think teams are going to hold the last 2 years against him because we used 3 different tight ends and he was behind really good receivers. Like, I don't,
100%.
Yeah, I don't think teams are going to look at him and say, oh, this is just some guy. No, they're going to look at the talent. They're going to look at how fast he is. They're going to look at the athleticism, and they're going to say, yeah, 13 mil a year, let's go. And I can't do it. I'm not doing it.
No, I can't either. And I think you're right. I mean, as a team like Chicago, who's going to look to add playmakers there for if it's Fields or Caleb, it's like Waldron there, like, oh, good fan. We'll bring him in. We can use him. And I know how to use him here better because we'll actually target him in the middle of the field. So it just becomes the cost too high. And if you had more cap space, maybe you can consider it. But quite honestly, when it gets to that price, of certain guys, just not quite worth it at the price on a rookie deal versus being paid. It's like two different places on sometimes these guys with where you stand on it.
It wouldn't shock me if Fant went somewhere and was worth it, like Evan Ingram was. Like Evan Ingram was not very good in New York, looked awful. Then he goes to Jacksonville, kills it, and then they give him 13 mil a year, and you're like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, Evan Ingram, 13 mil a year, sure.
Yeah, no, I definitely could see him going to the right kind of offense and finding success. And he's been a very consistent player as far as pass catcher goes throughout the course of his year. So he's got that to lean on. And hell, I mean, it's like we're seeing Parkinson projected at 6.5. Like, you can just kind of easily understand how well you get to Fant at 12. Yeah.
Oh yeah. All right. Next guy I've got here will be Mr. Phil Haynes. Phil Haynes, kind of a forgotten one here, but I look at Phil Haynes and I see a player who is going to probably just get 1-year deals every year for the rest of his career until his body breaks down. Mm-hmm. So I imagine it's going to be something like that. And I don't think he's a vet min player yet. I think his play is better than some of the guys that are kind of just living off those veteran minimum deals every year. Not by much. And the injuries are also a problem. He gets hurt pretty much every year. Like he just can't stay healthy. But I think that if we signed Phil Haynes as a backup, it would be like 1 year, 3 million. And if you sign him to start, it would be like 1 year, 5 million. And either way, I'm a no. I'm just trying to move on from this interior offensive line that we got, refresh it, and go forward with the guys on rookie deals and I just want to do something different in there. It's not working.
Yeah, the thing that stands out to me with Grubb, and I think that it's very important with the mobility of the offensive lineman, is you got to be able to move. And one every 7-8 plays, they ran a screenplay, did Washington. And the screenplays, doesn't matter whether it's bubble, doesn't matter whether it's a traditional screenplay. More often than not, you're going to need your guards or one of your guards to get out there in space and get to that block. And Damian just has proven over and over again that he can't get to those blocks. It's not his fault. That's the player he was coming out. He's a mauler right guard type. That's his player type. And he's actually decent in that role. I think what's best for him, if I was him, is to go to a team that put him at right guard for a year, let him reestablish his value, and then get back on the open market next year from the position that he should be playing. But I don't want him in here at this point just because of the fact that we have to go so hard lined to the athletic linemen. just doesn't add up as to why it would make sense, even on a
Right.
short-term deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we're both kind of a no there. I think we're going to be a no on most of these interior offensive linemen. Just, let's do things differently. Let's
Yeah.
refresh it. And I know it's not fun to replace 3 offensive linemen in one offseason. And look, maybe we are in a position where we can just say, okay, Bradford, you're up. The right guard spot is yours. But you can turn over 2 positions on an offensive line. I think you can do that in one offseason, and it's not going to completely nuke everything.
We did it 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So
At tackle, which is harder.
right. It had never been done in NFL history prior to that point, and we did it with the 2 rookies starting at tackle in 1 year. So that was 1 season ago, not long ago. To me, it's about talent when I come to the line, Brendan, and it's about we've been trying to get by with less for so long that's where we've lost our process when it comes to the offensive line. It ain't the offensive line coach. It ain't the scheme in the system. It's the invest the assets into the offensive line, and you will get the returns therein from it. And if they take that approach, then you will get it. If those 2 guys that they add, Brendan, like we did 2 years ago, right? We did a top 10 pick and a 3rd rounder. If you put the value assets into it and get guys that fit your scheme, you'll get good players. Line is actually an easier one to target in the draft. It's just the teams, of course, tend to just overlook it and go, it's not that important.
All right. So this next one is yours, and this is going to be another pretty big one. There's going to be some money here. I just don't know who it's going to be with. It's Jordan Brooks.
Jordan Brooks. Well, let me just make sure. I want to say we're caught up on these donos. Let me get the donut real quick here. Nolan, thank you for the $5 donation. He says, way too early to call. I see plenty of pundits mocking the Oregon center to the Hawks. Would they move positions on the line, or Olu stays a backup?
If you got JPJ, Olu would be a backup, and there's nothing wrong with Olu being a backup. He was a 5th round pick. It's not that big of a deal.
How about JPJ being moved to left guard?
Can he do that? He can do that. I mean, if he can do it, I mean, if he can do it, great. It feels like we get burned all the time on this, right? We move offensive linemen around.
Mm-hmm. I don't have a certain answer, so I wasn't. I'm not sure either of what I would do with that on that. But I think he could play. He can be better than Posick. Let me put it that way. He's not Posick at left guard. He'd be like offering maybe league average play at left guard if you put him over there with his upside.
Man, I don't want to spend the 16th pick on a guy who's going to be league average.
Yes.
I don't know.
Well, long term, you're popping him to center, I think. Long term, you're thinking he's going to be eventually the center. But, Eagles have had some luck with this lately, Brandon. They did Landon Dickerson to left guard, and they did Juergens to right guard while Kelsey's been there. So there has been some teams that have found success with it.
It should be easier to play guard than center. You have less to think about. You don't have to worry about throwing the ball through your legs.
It's all really mostly when it comes to those guys, Brendan, they don't typically have the size or the strength to go to guard from center. They have to be help defenders. And that's the thing that Jackson's got in spades is strength and power where, he can bring that, I think, to the left guard. So I think that's what they would be thinking, Nolan, if they took it. It would certainly be potentially fluid as a situation, but I would estimate it would be with the thought process he goes to guard, and they'd maybe like his upside more than me, Brent, where I've got him, where they say, no, he could be a above average league guard out there if you put him to there. That might be their evaluation on it.
Yeah, I'm open to it, but I'm not. I like Oluwatimi. If he's the starting center next year, I understand, but I'm not married to that idea either. Like, this is not a 1st round pick we spent on him.
No, it's not. That's my thinking. And the theory with on this too, Brent, is number one, depth is a big important part of the modern NFL game on the line in every position. But then number 2, having the competition there's not the worst thing. And if you've got a bit of a stack of talent and a guy's waiting to get his chance, and you have him sitting on the sidelines, it is not the worst possibility and outcome to have that kind of depth. So I like Jackson. I do say this about taking him at 16. I think you can trade back and get him later. There's not a requirement to sit there at 16. I'm not buying that he would go at like 18 or 19, just not in this draft, not with the players that'll picked up ahead of him, with probably going to be 5 quarterbacks selected up in that top 20 range. I think that he will dip to the 25 and you can move back to get him if you wanted to at that point.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We got plenty of time for things to settle on these big boards.
Yeah. Amen. But thank you, Nolan. I appreciate you on that. Big Patty Daddy in the house with the $2 donation says, did I go too far on the KJ All Day podcast?
Not if you had fun, Big Patty Daddy.
What happened? So I didn't get the chance to see Big Patty. What happened? I was out of the loop on that one. I'll have to check
Yeah,
it out.
I didn't see the whole thing either, but KJ seemed a little unamused by it, I guess. I don't know.
What was it that happened?
I don't know. He just kind of, was being really colorful and over the top, and I think KJ was like a little, he can get a little serious on that show sometimes, I think.
I'll try to check it out, Big Patty. Was it on the recent episode? What was the KJ episode?
I think it was like 3-4 days ago.
Okay. I'll check it out, Big Patty. See how it went, man. Sorry I didn't have a chance to. I've been head down, just kind of grinding a bit, so I haven't had a chance to check it out. But no, man, it's all good. This is the YouTube. This is fun. You can never be too much, go too far on YouTube, unless you're going buck naked or something. That's the only way. It's the only way to go wrong. But thank you, Big Patty. I'll check it out, man. I'll go look at that. I want to see how that went. Did it get awkward? Did it get awkward?
A little bit, I would say. I would say so, yeah.
Get him, Big Patty. Was it like a donation or was he on the show?
He was they did this like we're doing the screen share thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I gotta check it out then. Garth Knight, thank you for the $5 donation. I appreciate you for that, Garth. It says, can January 10th officially be Burt Cold Appreciation Day? He was the Winston Wolf behind Pete's removal. By the way, I do appreciate what Pete accomplished here. Absolutely. And yeah, Burt the quiet assassin in the background, right, Brendan?
Yeah, that's a reasonable assumption to make, I think. That's a reasonable thing to think about the way this whole thing played out. January 10th be Burt Cold Appreciation Day. I mean, we don't even have a Paul Allen Appreciation Day for the day he bought the Seahawks. We got some work to do there before we get to that, though.
Maybe eventually, Garth. Maybe eventually we get it. Like I agree with Brendan. We got to get the Paul Allen, and you got to get the statues up front, and you get around to the Burt Cold. But I'll say this: like Burt did what is his job there to be, and that is that it's not on Jody Allen's shoulders solely to evaluate this big major decision that was made and have to. It's on you. What do you want to do? Yeah, the final decision lies with her, but she's informed by this collective committee that's as much, her knights of the round table, so to speak, and providing her that value back and that support. And I think he served in that role for her in this spot and helped her in this decision. And it's one of the reasons it was the right one is that you include a lot of people into this to make this choice. This wasn't a knee-jerk reaction from an owner who's upset or pissy with the coach. This is a tactical decision in the way they made it, I believe. And Burt is at the center of that, to your point, Garth.
Right.
But thank you, man. I appreciate the donation and well said, man. Winston Wolf. I like the Pulp Fiction reference. You got a body in the back, minus a car on the head. I forget how the speech goes. Take me to it. You've used that movie, right?
Oh yeah, many times.
Classic film. Jordan Brooks. Jordan Brooks is going to probably get somewhere between $10 and $12 million, a little bit like the Fant contract, maybe even upwards of 4 years because he is still a young player just going into his prime. You look at the Tremaine Edmonds deal and the Jermaine Pratt deal from last year. These guys were not star players at the position, but got paid very highly. Brooks has been a guy that's been steady Eddie as far as staying on the field throughout his time here, Brendan, but he's been a guy that's been beat on in coverage quite a bit. And despite the fact he's missed a good amount of games, still well over 2,000 yards given up in coverage. And it's not just a matter of being a liability. It's a matter of being one of the worst coverage linebackers in the sport. And I think that to pay that kind of money when you're getting that, when I don't really think on the run defense and on the tackling that it's some defining trait from him beyond other people in the league to override those limitations and deficiencies. So this is a decision for me that's a fairly easy one where I go, I just have to, I got to let him go out and test that market and get that contract and call it a day on that. And that's just sort of the name of the game on this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I think he will get 4 years, like you said, because he is young. He's still really young for a guy who's been in the league. It feels like he's been in the league forever.
Yeah, it does.
He's still young. I think 4 years, I said 52 million. I think it's going to be out there for him. He's a great athlete. He's got NFL size. Somebody out there like D'Amico in Houston might be like, yeah, give me that. I want that. 13 million a year. Let's go.
Yeah. Man, that's expensive.
Yeah, it is. As for whether or not I'd be willing to do it, hopefully not. I will say this. If you can't bring back Bobby, if Bobby just decides he doesn't want to come back because he wanted to play with Pete or whatever, it's going to be really hard to say goodbye to both of your starting linebackers And like, what do you do at that point? If you're not getting Patrick Queen, are you just going to get 2 rookies for 2024? Like it sucks, right?
It does. I mean, I would say maybe like this. If you've got to make the choice between, let's say, Jordan Brooks at 12 million per year or 14 million per year for Devin White, 14.5 million per year for Devin White, I would probably go with more of a Devin White. There's, Levante David's on the open market. He's old. He's probably just a titch below Bobby, but he also brings the coverage where he doesn't bring as good the run defense. Bobby brings the run defense, maybe not as good as the coverage. Is that an alternative option? You can go for the 1 year, $7 million deal. I think that there's other alternatives. I do say this, Brendan. When we went to a Super Bowl in 2005, we had 2 rookie linebackers. You went second, third round, Leroy Hill, Lofa Tatupu. Rookies, Super Bowl. Great players, first year. I think that it's not the worst thing in the world to say maybe we go with 2 young linebackers in this draft. And I say that also because of the fact that the middle linebackers in this draft are particularly strong. And I think that you could grab a couple of starters in this particular one. You could have a Peyton Wilson's T-Rex arms push him down to the 3rd round and have grabbed a guy maybe in the late 1st, 2nd round range as well. And then you've got a decent stack there ready to roll. Are they going to be young? Are they going to be green? Yeah, sure. But you can address it if that's the worst case scenario, if you have to that way.
So I'm going to be a no on Brooks, but I am going to be amenable to it if Bobby doesn't come back. I'm at least going to be open to it. I'm also going to be open to the possibility of McDonald going, I'm going to turn that guy into an all-pro, just like I did Patrick Queen, because Patrick Queen was not good at first at all. Like he was every bit as lost as Jordan Brooks has looked at times.
Fair. It's fair. Definitely fair way of putting it. Yeah. I'm definitely a no on this one from my standpoint. And I could get where he might get a little bit drawn to do what you say with that being McDonald with Brooks. But I think that there's better ways to go with this and spending the money at this point. I think he's such a deficiency in coverage. I just don't think you're fixing that.
What price point would it have to be for you to be open to Brooks coming back?
He had a worse season than Bobby Wagner. I'm going to pay Bobby Wagner $5.5 million, but Jordan, because he's younger, gets to be paid better. I don't see the thinking or the logic behind that. And I don't think anybody make that argument. I mean, there's people that make the argument a little bit with the whole, but they aren't accurately looking at Jordan Brooks' season if they are. And there's no way you can make any argument to me that Jordan was better than Bobby last year. In what way? As a run defender, as a tackler, in coverage? No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. And no, he wasn't. So less than Bobby on a 1 year prove it deal.
Yeah, it's not impossible. He is coming out. He did get hurt again in the last game of the year, I guess, but I feel like somebody's going to pony up. I just feel like somebody's going to pony up.
That's what it was. You got the $80 million in cap space. It's literally like when you're as a team reaching that point, as far as the cap space money, it's burning the hole in your pocket. You're going to do that thing the Patriots did a couple of years ago where they had that similar money where you're handing out contracts to everybody because you got to spend the money. And so these kind of guys get signed, I think, in that wash a little bit, to your point, in the way that you're talking about.
All right. So that is Jordan Brooks. You are a firm no. I'm a no, but I'm a little more open to it than you are. I think he's a little bit better than you do, but I still have a feeling somebody's going to get to a price point that I'm not interested in matching.
Yeah. Understandable.
All right. So next guy, I'll lead with this is Damian Lewis. Previously we did Phil Haynes, by the way. I think you got the two mixed up a little bit. At one
my
point.
Bad. Okay.
Yeah.
Same outcome for me.
Yeah. Except I think Damian Lewis gets some money. He's had good seasons. He was good as a rookie at right guard. He was good 2 years ago at left guard. He's young. He was not a blue chipper, but he was a 3rd round pick. There's clearly talent there. I think the right team would look at him and go, yeah, we want a piece of that. So I wrote down 3 years, 22.5. So that's $7.5 million a year. I think somebody's going to do it. Would it be me? No, I don't think so. Even if you moved him back to right guard, I don't even know if he can still do it anymore. He hasn't played right guard in 3 years. Maybe he's forgotten. Maybe he'd have to relearn everything. And I don't want to have to deal with that for $7.5 million.
Yeah. Both the case, Phil and Damian, just also for me, regardless of price here, I mean, even bringing them back on vet minimum deals at this point, in my opinion, we need mobile linemen. Like it ain't about, well, the guy does some good stuff with it. Can he move? No. That's it. End of story to me on this one at this point. And I'm going to harp on this because we made the transition 2 years ago to needing mobile linemen, and then we proceeded to not get mobile linemen outside of the 2 tackles. So don't make the same mistake twice in the couple year span. Don't get comfortable with, well, we know what we're getting with this. Bring in what fits to what you're trying to operate in your scheme. And there's plenty of guys in this draft that you can do this with. Like the middle linebacker, this is a good draft and be looking for interior offensive linemen that fit to your scheme and your needs. Do that, or go out in the free agency point, Brendan, where there are guys like a Robert Hunt with the Miami Dolphins who will get a mid-level great contract. But he's been in a mobile-based scheme, right? He can move in space. He's bringing a fit to what you want him to do. So I think that's much of a more better alternative potentially if you're really needing to go that way for certainty, but not with Damian Lewis. He should go back to right guard, but like you say, I don't know if even where his fit is there. I mean, he's turned into a weird player at the left guard position, frankly.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was Andre Dillard with the Eagles when he had to move from right tackle to left tackle for a game. He was talking about it. He's like, it's like writing all your life with your right hand and then having to write with your left hand. It's really hard to do that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a given. There's a price point where it's reasonable. Like if Damian Lewis, if there's no money out there and it's like 1 year, $2 million, he's worth that. I'll do that just as a backup, but I can't be moving forward.
I think it's the problem that we've had inherently here, Brendan, is that these slog-footed linemen can't get out there. Like I said, you're running the screen once every 8 plays. So what does that mean? You're going to trot the guy out there when he's playing on the field, where now you can't run screen plays anymore. It doesn't make any sense to me. It again becomes a little bit like, well, I know what this guy is, and he's a former 3rd-round pick, but it's not really having anything to do with the price of business here, which is that these guys have got to move in space. They've got to hit the reach blocks. They've got to get to the second level. They got to get out in the screen game. They got to pull back across the formation like you did with all their linemen. Damian Lewis can't do that. He can pull back and get a wham block where he's got to go 3 spaces to his right and hit the wham block, but he's not going to pull back out in front across the whole rest of the line of scrimmage to get back to the strong side of the play, which is something I've seen Grubb require from his linemen, and he's going to require from us. And so I just think you're going to have plays get completely destroyed when you bring those kind of guys on the field, and there's going to be a tendency to get them on the field when you have them under contract as backups. And I think that just doesn't make sense to me as to why you'd want to do that versus just go to somebody that's maybe not as been in the league as long, but at least fits to what you want to do so you can run your full scheme.
Right. But I think somebody out there is going to give him like at least 2 years, 15 million. It's going to be somewhere around there. And I can't follow there. So we're both a no on Damian Lewis. I think that's there's definitely a universe where he gets to just sit at right guard for his whole career and everything's great. Like he probably would have been a really good player at right guard his whole career, but now I don't know what he is. I have no idea what he is.
Me as well.
Okay, you lead off with this next one here. Our other free agent tight end, Colby Parkinson.
This would have been one that I do have and Parkinson came in, of course, 4th round guy. The Seahawks had a high grade on, who's developed as a blocker, added some really good weight through his time. This past year was, I think, as active as he's been throughout his first few years here as far as a pass catcher goes, and had the game winner. I think it was against the Titans on the trust ball that Geno threw. So he's been able to build on his skill sets since coming out of Stanford, and he's not a remarkably great player or upper level, but he has been pretty solid for you. The sports track numbers indicate that he's going to get somewhere around $6.5 million per year. That's a bit too pricey for me when it comes to Parkinson. I like what he's brought, but that's just a bit higher. I'd be willing to do something like a 1 year 3 or a 2 year 6.5. But again, that looks like that's half the rate of what he's due to be making. So that doesn't seem to be very realistic. So I would come back to saying, well, I'm probably going to have to let him go just to test the open market at that point, if that's what he's worth.
Yeah, I have Spotrac actually has a market value estimate for him at 4 years, 26, I think. I think they're on the right track, but I don't think it's going to be 4. I think it's going to be 3. Yeah. I don't know what he's done to deserve a 4-year deal. I'm not seeing that. So I ended up landing on 3 years, 20 million. And I mean, it depends on how you're planning on using him, of course, because I do think Disley comes back, but I would be okay with that if you feel like you can use him better than the previous regime did. If you feel like there's a place for him, Disley probably going to be gone after next year because it is the last year of his deal. We're, of course, losing Fant. There's no way we're going to be able to match that contract that I think he's going to get. I'm open to this one. And that takes a lot of the stress off the rest of the offseason if you can at least have the Parkinson Disley tight end room. That way you only need to add one in the draft, and it doesn't have to be like some Brock Bowers superstar. It can just be a guy who maybe sits behind guys like Ben Sinnote. It could be a guy like what's the TCU guy, Jared Wiley.
Yep.
Yeah, and that would be fine. So partially because of necessity, because we have such a need at the position right now, I would be okay with 3 for 20 on Colby. I wouldn't hate it.
I can see a little bit more on the understanding with the upside that he might offer, to your point on not being utilized to his utmost here the first time through. But yeah, I would just be hesitant with it it's the load balance issue as much as Colby here, where it's just that contract to give out to that guy versus the other ways of how I can use that money in free agency to better help this team. There's a better option to me of going a different route than spending that money. It's just, he's not to me a $6 million a year player, and certainly not on a multi-year deal at that.
Yeah, it's tough. I feel like people are going to look at him and see the talent rather than the numbers, right? People are going to be like, that's a 6'7" guy who can block now, by the way.
Yeah. It's going to be a bit like Fant too. Like you said, there might be a team that sees Fant and they get the most out of him, that 800, 900,000 yard season potential that may be inside of him, because they're like, well, we're going to use him in the right way. We're going to actually feature him. And same thing that you could kind of, I think, to your point, apply to a lesser degree with Parkinson, where it's like, oh, we can better maximize. He's got this skill set. He's got a big body we can trust down near the red zone. Let's try to see if we can lean on that a bit and bring that in. I could see it. It makes sense.
Yeah. So we split a little bit there. You're a no. I'm actually kind of a yes, I think. Or at the very least, I'm open to it. I don't know what Ryan Grubb thinks about tight ends. Like, tight ends were not a big part of the offense at Washington. We had Culp making a catch or two a game and Westover making a catch or two a game.
I guess he does run a high number of 12 personnel, though. I will say that, looking at some of the fact of the matters that were in there on the look at Grubb, is he does run this share of 12 personnel.
A lot of that might have been because McMillan was hurt all year, though. Maybe it was necessity.
Yeah, good point. It's possible on that.
All right. Next guy we have here is I'll lead with this one. Not a big one. This is a Devin Bush free agent coming up here. Signed 1 year, $3.5 million last offseason. Didn't do that much. Got on the field a few times. Was kind of unremarkable. Wasn't bad. Wasn't good. Was just kind of there. Did his job. Collected his paycheck. Not really much to say about this one. He kind of lost his mind a little bit in the last game of the year and left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. Yeah. Yeah, I get more comments about Devin Bush than I do about anything to do with his play. So that's not good.
No, it's not good.
Yeah. So that being said, I mean, he had a better year with Pittsburgh than he did with us, right? And he still only got $3.5 million. So I think people are kind of getting sick of waiting for this guy to get over the injury. It's been like 4 years. He's probably never getting over it now. So just because there is some talent here, I put down one year, $3 million, and I was a no. I would, especially after what happened to that last game. It seems like he has some issues that maybe he needs to work out. Like, I don't know. It just left a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah, he popped a little bit for me in the preseason, where I had some hope that was going to, become this thing. But then it just quickly, just when he's on the field, it just didn't seem like it was happening. And you've had some pretty bad defensive performances when he was in there at the end of the year. He had one game where he had a lot of tackles, like 18 tackles, but it was a game where you're just getting, gashed. And I'm the same place. I just would rather kind of like to go in a different direction there. I think that I wasn't impressed by him as we got into the season. And he had his chance. He had a shot to go in there for Brooks and kind of show what he could do with what he brought. And I just didn't see that come to fruition.
All right. This is next up, another smaller one. You'll lead with this one. Another one of our outgoing interior offensive linemen. This one is Evan Brown, center.
So Evan Brown brought in last year on a 1 year, $2.1 million deal to be the starter, and played basically every game at the exception of a couple with Olatimi, I think, or one with Olatimi there. Came in and you kind of got what you paid for. You paid $2 million in the open market for a free agent center. You're probably going to get below average play at this position, and he was below average play at the position. And in fact, I think he was one of the league worst starting centers in this league when it's all brought down to it. So, you've gone cheap here with Blythe, Austin Blythe the previous year. You went right back to the well again here with Brown. Just goes to again speak to the previous regime's blind spot when it came to really investing in the quality offensive line in the line. It's what I've been harping on is it's not about having to offload DK Metcalf so you can invest in the offensive line. It's about investing in the damn offensive line. That's what it's about.
Right.
It's just put the resources into it. Brown, not his fault. I would not look to bring him back because the mobility thing is not really there with him either, in my opinion. He's more of a pass protecting kind of guy and as a center than he is as a run blocker. I think I would prefer on this one to go with finding again more of a pure scheme fit, and that's where I'm at.
Do you think he gets anything of significance out there on the open market? Any kind of a raise even over what he got from us?
No. How bad did our A and B gap runs look this year? Anything at the point of attack that we ran, they'll turn on the tape and it'll be snap after snap of the hammering the A and B gap runs right over his tail, and him not getting any push both in double team situations, but also when he singles up on the one tech. And then you'll see a lot of the tape in there where he's allowing the quick, easy penetration, and that's at the damn point of attack. That's right where the play's going, and that's, to me, he might get a vet minimum deal to come in as a backup, but I don't see any team rewarding him or giving him any even decent deal.
Yeah, I think he could probably get what he got with us. Probably another deal like that where he just gets to stay in the NFL. You get to stay in the NFL for another year. And I would be a no. Just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me to bring him back when you're going to be running this Ryan Grubb offense that's going to require a lot more. Mm-hmm. I would rather just roll Oluwatimi out there for 17 games next year than go with Evan Brown.
Me too. Amen.
Okay. So we've got two more, and then we've got a bunch of restricted guys, and the restricted guys are kind of easy because it's just yes or no, right?
Right.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to lead with Mario Edwards Jr. I think we signed him at the last second last year. He was very, very late in the game. We picked him up. So we actually got a veteran deferment from the NFL where they cover part of his cap hit. It was like 10% of his cap hit was not applied to our books because they had some kind of like program where like they try to make it a little easier for these veterans to get a job.
That's cool. I'm glad the NFL does that because those guys get retired sometimes earlier than they should.
Mm-hmm. And there isn't a ton to say here because Mario Edwards has been a guy who's been farming those vet min deals for like the last 3 years. He's just always a guy who's just okay. He just hangs around, never any big money out there, but he does his job. He does his job. And I think he played okay last year. I know the numbers weren't huge or anything like that, but I think he did his job. And if we can't put together our defensive line the way we want to this offseason, and we're sitting there in like April and we're like, oh, we're one guy short. Go call up Mario Edwards and say, hey, vet min 1.2, 1.3, whatever. Come on in. I'm totally good with that. And I can't imagine him getting much more.
I wouldn't have a problem at that point with it. I think he wore down a little bit. I think all those linemen wore down a little bit. He was actually pretty nice early on in the year. Carolina game in particular, he was a monster. Monster at like 9 pressures, I think, or something that game. So, if you bring back on a vet minimum, I'm okay with that. But that would be the only way. It would not be a high priority. And like you say, if it's just you almost kind of like get through the draft, get through free agency, and it's like, well, we still have a little bit of a tiny need over here. Then okay, so be it at that point.
Yeah, keep him on speed dial.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, last one. You take this one here. DJ Dallas becoming a free agent this offseason.
DJ Dallas, another 4th rounder. I think that the team took 4th round on him. A guy that, certainly runs very hard when you give him the ball, and he will be tough to bring down in a fight like hell in every run. Doesn't get a lot of carries here. It's always been kind of the 4th guy, 3rd, 4th guy. Found a role as a special teamer, but I think it wasn't particularly as a good special teamer. Fumbles, good as okay as a kick returner, punt returner, completely lost in the woods. I think DJ Dallas is going to have a hard time finding any contract out there to remain in the league as a running back. Running back's a very competitive place in the NFL as it is already. And I think right now, I mean, maybe if Homer can get a deal, I guess he can get a deal, but he hasn't been a good special teams guy. So even offering that value is not there necessarily like he might be able to do on the market.
And Homer was considered to be like the preeminent blocking running back,
right.
One of the best. DJ's a good blocker, but he's not like Homer.
No, not in the same vicinity where Homer was. Right. Great point.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're a no on DJ?
I'm just a no, man. I think that there's that you can shoot bigger even for that fourth running back role. There's better in
Right.
these drafts, man. We look at these drafts every year. There's guys that are like, ooh, that guy there, ooh, that guy there, and that's where I'm stuck on.
Hmm. Yeah, I wrote down just based off other running back contracts, I wrote down like 1 year, 1.6 million, and I'm a no on that. And honestly, like even vet min, like that's still more money than I'm spending on a seventh round running back, right?
That's right. By much so, because it's a couple $100,000 on the other side, $400,000
Yeah.
on that guy. So yeah, that stuff adds up over a roster, man. If you can get those in for the cheaper spots, and you got to choose those positions you find cheaper spots in, right? Like you can't
Yeah.
roll with everything on the high cost range of things.
Right. So I don't know why you would bring him back. It doesn't really make any sense on any level to me to bring back DJ. So I'm definitely a no there. I think before we get to the restricted guys, you want to go through these donos real
Yeah.
quick?
Let's pop through the donos. Sorry, Jose, a little bit slow on acknowledging on that one, but thank you for the $2 donation. Marshawn, eligible for the Hall of Fame next year. Should he go? And go Hawks.
I think he should. I don't think he will. That's kind of how I've been feeling for a while now. I think that his performance in the league, combined with the fact that he's such an iconic part of football lore for his era, like him and Adrian Peterson, probably the most iconic running backs of their era, of that era.
Mm-hmm.
He should get in, but he probably won't.
No, and I think the thing that holds him back, Brennan, is not anything having to do with on the field or even a longevity thing or even a 10,000 yard thing. I think what ends up holding him back is he was I don't want to talk to the media guy. And I know he's opened that up and now gotten better as far as retirement and maybe doing some of that stuff. But those media members, whether it's baseball, basketball, or football, and they're voting on the hall, that's who votes on the hall is media members. They tend to hold grudges for this type of thing. And so I'm anticipating that there's going to be some grudges against Marshawn for not being as more forthright and making their job easier to be done. I don't think that should be held against him. And in my opinion, he is the Earl Campbell of this generation, bare minimum. Earl got in. Earl was also a guy that didn't have necessarily the longevity. I think Marshawn actually has more yards than Earl Campbell. I think that if a guy like Earl gets in, if a guy like Terrell Davis gets in, as you said, to me, there's got to be a bit of an impact on this was this guy a player of his generation? Before we get to stats and everything else, was the reputation of this guy this is a tone setter. This is one of the best at his position. This is a guy that you strap your helmet on just a little bit more firmly when you're walking on the football field with Marshawn Lynch on the other side of you. And if that's the case, and I agree with your list of saying, well, there's Peterson and then Marshawn. Those are your two backs of this generation. I mean, it was hard to be a generational back in this spot, right? A lot of those Dalvin Cook types that might give you a couple of years, but then it's off the cliff they go. So I think he's deserved it. I think he's earned it. I think he should get into it. I think someday he will, but not first ballot. It's going to probably take him a couple of swings to probably get in.
Yeah, to me, it's Edgerrin James is in the Hall of Fame, so Marshawn should get in. That's always kind of the way I've looked at it. Which is also why I think Shaun Alexander should be in, but he's not going to get in at this point. Like I've talked about this before. If you have a decent career and you win a league MVP, I think you should get in.
I can understand that argument with it. I can. And that's because MVP is the most valuable player. And so it's not taking the supporting cast and play. It's saying you were the most valuable. And Sean gets in. I'm not going to be mad. He got in. Marshawn got in. I'm not going to be mad at either of that. It's great if the Hawks get in. But the Sean one's an interesting argument to have and to break down because it's kind of like on the other end of it where the stats now weigh out a little bit more than some of the other things coming into play there a bit. But I think you're right. If this guy gets in, then that gets in, right? It's a logical, principled, like, okay, what's the standard here? Right.
Yeah.
If you hit the standard, you hit the standard.
Yeah, because it's not even like a Joe Namath thing. Edgerrin James got in less than 15 years ago. It's not that long ago.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's been pretty recent with him. So he didn't have to wait that long. And yeah, he got in. I think the thing with Edgerrin's that he has where he's got Marshawn beat is just so many more of those receiving yards. It's like you're adding like 5,000 receiving yards, I think, with Edgerrin on top of the 10,000 rushing yards. And with Edgerrin too, I think they go, well, hey, did he have two Hall of Famers blocking for him up front? He had Jeff Saturday. That's going to be one.
Didn't Tariq Glenn make it, or did he not?
That might sound right. Or maybe one of those.
Yeah.
Just a second here.
Yeah. And Edgerrin was not the same after the injury. I think he got injured in like 03, and he came back and he was so slow. It was so depressing.
Yeah. Well, it is one of those things. He was never really a big burst guy. Just enough to be extra, and then you lose that little bit, and it's like you're average. Tariq didn't get in, but he did have some good linemen too, in addition to that, and Jeff Saturday. So it wasn't like he was dealing behind crap lines and everything else. And hey, look, how much was Edgerrin benefited by Peyton Manning and what he was doing with that too? So it's yeah, I think your point's right. I think if that guy gets done, then you got to go with the other one and say he deserves on the other side of it. Mega Lucario, thank you for the $5 donation. Appreciate you for that. Says, maybe we can draft Luke McCaffrey and he can terrorize the 49ers with a McCaffrey of our own. Also, what's the ideal first round trade down for you guys?
Yeah, I haven't looked at Luke McCaffrey that much. The son of a famous NFL player that I've been into is, of course, the Frank Gore Jr. one, because I like that guy.
Understandable, man. He's a fun player. So he's really good.
Yeah. So I don't know much about Luke, but I've heard he's good.
Yeah, Luke's good, but Mega probably goes, I think, 4th, 5th round range. Does Luke McCaffrey? What you do like about him too is he's the son of the player who's playing the position his father played in. And so what you see with him is a very high level of refinement as a receiver coming out in his ability to, pace his routes, get off the line of scrimmage, deal with physicality through his routes, how to sit down in zones, just some general things that as a son of a former player that's played the position, you think you'd understand. And that was his dad. Dad was not a tremendously talented guy. He was like 6'4", kind of your Joe Jurvicious kind of a body style. And so he was a guy that was about the contested catch. He was constantly getting lit up, but he'd hold on to the ball and make the grab whenever they needed a tough grab. When it wasn't Shannon Sharp or the other receiver they had there at the time, doing what he was doing. Rod Smith doing what he was doing. So McCaffrey's fun. He's a good player. He's not he's much different from his brother, but a good player nonetheless. My ideal trade down scenario in round 1 is a twofer. I go 15, 25, maybe even to the top of the second. Hopefully getting to a finalized point of picking up 5 total picks in the top 90 at that point. That's my ideal scenario.
Yeah. I'm pretty on board with that. I don't know if I want to leave the first round completely. It depends on how the draft is falling, right? Because I mean, if Brock Bowers is there at 16, I don't want to trade down at all.
No. It's in general terms. I'm not fundamentalist on this, right? Like I don't have to have it be like it's got to be that. It's what I would do if in general terms, Zerzon Newton sitting there, or Braylon Trice is sitting there, or and that's where I would move. But Brock Bowers is my no-go. If he's there, I'm grabbing that all day.
Dallas Turner?
No. Because my thinking on this is that there's 10 blue chip players in this draft. I designate a blue chip player as star potential. I designate the tier 2 range as above average starter potential. So from 11 to about 65, 70, you're in, to me, above average starter potential range of the draft. So why pick at the top of that, right? Why pick at the top of that pie if it's all similarly talented throughout in that stretch, instead of if you have the ability to pick up more picks in that stretch of period.
And is Dallas Turner in that 10 for you?
No.
None
of the edges are blue chip.
Really?
No.
Not even Latu?
Latu is supremely talented as far as using his hands and as a technician, but from a natural talent with explosion, like I don't think he's going to test great with the 10-yard split. I don't think that it's naturally necessarily like that bender that gets around the edge with explosiveness. It's more explosiveness with his hands and, working that technique, chaining together pass rush moves, which will work to a degree. But I don't think it's take a guy that was like this a couple of years ago, Brendan Hutchinson. Hutchinson was the same way coming out, right? Aiden was very much a technician, but then he also had the testing numbers that back that up, that pushed them up to be that top end pick, right? He had the elite 10-yard split on top of that. And so that's where I'm guessing on this, but I'm guessing Latu's not going to bring that same kind of elite 10-yard split.
Right. I want to kind of trade down until you can still come away with one of the top interior offensive linemen, like the Graham Barton, Troy Fatanu, JPJ. I'm forgetting somebody. Yeah, if Bebe launches up, for some reason he ends up in the 3rd round of all these big boards. I don't know what's going on, but
I don't either. But I mean,
I feel like it's going to correct.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, but I don't want to trade down so far that I lose out on all those guys. Then I'm going to be annoyed. But I'm willing to trade down as far as it takes to get to that part of the draft.
Agreed. I would be in the same mold. I wouldn't want to move out to my ideal is once I'm done trading back Michael Lucario to do what Brendan's advocating for is then you just grab one of the best of the bunch there of that collection of about 4 guys that are all around the same place, all really high value, all really safe picks, and all hitting what would be a very much a desperate need for us, in my opinion. And when we look at this line right now.
Right.
Thank you, Mega. And thank you, Nolan, for another donation as well. He says, what about Westover, the tight end out of Washington, as an undrafted rookie free agent? Guy is all hands.
I think there's going to be a serious push to bring Westover to Seattle, one way or the other. I don't think he's big enough to get drafted, but he makes all the sense in the world for what we need right now because we're probably going to need a third tight end because I think we keep Disley. I think one way or the other, we get another starting caliber tight end. Either we keep Colby or we draft Bowers or we draft Stover or whatever, or Jatavion Sanders. That's another guy. And then we need like that third tight end, and Westover is just perfect for that role. He could be like, what was the name of the guy who caught the game winner against Tampa Bay in 2019?
Oh, yeah. Hollister.
Yeah. He could be like our Jacob Hollister with better hands.
I like it. And I every time I watch the Huskies, Westover was doing something that was, the guy's catch radius and his ability to catch tough balls and big moments showing up like he did. Hell, if you want to take a flyer in the 7th round to kind of fill out the tight end room like that, Brendan, I'm okay with doing that too on this. So I liked Westover Concierge. I didn't watch him as much on his blocking ability, but undoubted, man, when you throw him the ball, contested catch situations or not, he's going to reel that thing in. So sign me up for that, man. That's a great idea, and I'm with it.
Yeah,
a lot of these tight ends can't catch, Brendan. Some of these draft lines, I'm like, ooh, the hands are not there on this guy. It's a little bit rough. Garth Knight, thank you for the $5 donation. Says, Killer Bees, give me your percentage chances Marshawn gets in the Hall of Fame on a first ballot. I think he gets in on a first ballot, but it's all just on gut instinct.
2%.
I'm gonna go 1%, Garth. These reporters are bitter bitches. I'm sorry, but they just are. They get this like thing. They get like they're like a mob boss that's been like disrespected or something. Oh, how dare you? How dare you disrespect me, Marshawn? I have the power of your Hall of Fame above you. You will respect that. Respect my authority. It's like. And it's like, it's childish as hell. It really is by these sports writers. Like, let go. Your job's not to be like, did he treat me with the respect? Did he kiss my brass ring? No. Was he a great player on the football field? Judge it for that. Leave the rest of the stuff out of it. So he deserves to be in, but they're bitter, Garth, and this is the way they've rolled. I've seen it in the sports in a variety of different ways show itself up. The sports writers kind of like, especially those old school guys, have a lot more extra ego than they need to be having. Like, chill out. You know what I mean? You're not playing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so what you're saying is Bill Belichick's not going to get in the Hall of Fame.
Well,
no one the media,
yeah, but then there's a point where you supersede it so far by what you've done in your accomplishments that even they can't get bitter about it because they look so bad at that point of like, ooh, somebody's being ridiculous. It looks childish to me. That's what it comes off as being, and it is. It's like, be a grown up. Some guys just don't want to talk to the media. It's not their fault. They're there to play the game. I know they signed up for that. Okay. But not everybody wants to sit there with cameras in their face and be super eloquent and try to come up with stuff. So I'm okay with it. I don't think you should have it held up against him, but it will be Garth. I think it will be. And if it doesn't, then I'll give the reporters, Garth, a lot of credit for changing their ways. And maybe the new generation of reporters aren't going to be so with a stick stuck up their butt about the process,
Right.
Jose Garcia, thank you for the $2 donation. He asks, any former Hawks who might join the coaching staff?
I don't know. God, are any of them coming up the ranks? One guy, I did see one Niners account on X suggest that Richard Sherman should be their new defensive coordinator, which is a hysterical idea.
Once again, please do it.
Yeah.
please by God, do that.
He's got enough CTE to match a John Lynch in there for sure. So,
oh, definitely step for step on that one.
So I don't know if they're saying that because they think Sherman's going to become a coach, but it's not like these guys have a lot of ties back to this organization anymore. Before then, it was like, oh, Pete's here. That's the guy who actually coached me. Now I get to coach under him. But now you don't have that. So I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so, Jose. It's been more of the former coaches have been former players have been the players that haven't necessarily reached the heights. I think your Chris Richards or your Deshaun Sheds or it's more along these lines if you're going to bring a guy. And there's not a lot of those out there in the league right now, so I don't foresee there being anybody. And I don't think that any of these real like people mentioned KJ Wright or something like that. I don't think that they want a coach. Richard's doing just fine in his pundit role and doing what he's doing. I don't think that he wants to go into that grind. It's hard to be a coach in the NFL. It's a lot of hours. It's kind of unsung kind of work too, as well, where you're not always, revered for what you're doing and putting in all that hard work. So I just don't think these guys want to necessarily do that myself.
Yeah, it's not very rewarding being a coach, I don't think. You work I've theorized about this before, but you're working 120 hours a week?
Oh yeah. If you're sleeping in your office, I think your head's popping up and you're just bam right back into work the next week. And it's brutal. You got to love what you do on it. And if you're just kind of like, well, I love being a player, but I think I would kind of like to be a coach. Not enough, it requires more than that.
Right. All right.
Well, thank you for the donation there, Jose. Give me 1 second, Brendan. Sorry. Give me
No problemo. Just one moment, guys. He'll be right back.
Thank you for bearing with me.
All right. So you're ready to crank through these final few free agents.
Let's do it.
All right. So we've got two restricted guys. Two guys are restricted free agents. And the restricted right of first refusal tag this year is $2.828 million.
Okay.
So just shy of 3. So the first restricted free agent, I'll lead with this one, Darrell Taylor. I don't think you're going to put the second round or first round tender on this guy. That's not a consideration. The only consideration is, do you want to do the 2.828 tender? And to me, it depends on whether or not you're planning on going after somebody like, say, Clowney. If you're going to go after somebody like a Kyle Van Noy, one of Mike McDonald's boys. If you're doing that, then there's no room for Taylor. You just let him go. Let him sign where he signs. If you don't do that, if you're looking at this edge room like, okay, you've got Nwosu, you've got Mafe, and you've got Hall, then I'm at least open to it. I'm not saying that I would be a yes, but I would be like, okay, if you want to spend $2.8 million on a guy like a Darrell Taylor, maybe Mike McDonald gets something better out of him. I don't know. I'm not going to be angry about that. But again, my ideal would be to go for somebody like a Clowney this offseason. That would be my dream.
Yeah, I would be a hard no on it. I think that the same issues that Darrell Taylor has in pass coverage, where it's like, there's a way you can say to guys where they go, well, he's got a little bit of an issue in pass coverage, or, oh my God, don't leave that guy in pass coverage. Well, Darrell Taylor is the same thing when it comes to dealing with the run game, and that he can't play the run. And as a pass rusher, he's not progressed or taken any steps forward. And when I put that combination, I go, no, I don't want to spend $3 million on that. I don't want the guy on the field anymore. He's not helping us win football games. And if that's the case, then it's not worth $3 million to me. I think a Clowney would be an ideal, obvious, but if we're just talking about a Van Noy, who probably cost you maybe a 1 year, $3 million deal, the same that you're going to spend about on at his age, he coming off a 9-sack year, plays good run defense off the edge when you need him to play, like much more of a complete player and a better pass rusher at this point. You'd be merely going with Taylor because, well, he's younger, but it's not about who's better. And at this point in time, I'm not trying to keep players for what, it's to me not Mike's job to come in here and, fix all the broken toys. If it's broken, it's broken. Move on and find something that you can work with and that comes in the door with a little bit less errors in its code.
Right. Okay. So I'm not completely closed off to it, but I kind of want to do something else at this point, especially now that we're refreshing this coaching staff. Like the previous coaching staff may have had some affinity or loyalty to Daryl Taylor, but these guys won't. Right. So you may as well use that opportunity to move off of somebody like that. Our other restricted free agent, and I was told by many people that he is restricted. So even though my research indicated he might not be, I guess he is, Michael Jackson. So same rules apply. You lead with this one.
I'm a yes on this one. One guy that we left off on the free agent list, but it's okay that we did because I don't think he's really in part coming back here would be the what was that corner that we had from the Steelers here last year? Artie Burns. So
wow, he's not listed here. Spotrac messed up.
Yeah, they must have messed up. But he wasn't going to come anyway, so it's okay. But you've got Artie Burns going off, you got Michael Jackson going off and losing 2. You're going to need to bring 2 in from some other place. What I would look to do in this type of situation would be tender at the Mike Jackson at that 2.8, because I think that you do play zone in the system, so he does fit to some of that you can bring in there on it. And we don't know what maybe Kobe Bryant moves back and be in the other corner at that point. We'll see what they choose to do. Maybe they draft a guy. Some of this depends upon Mike McDonald's outlook of the corners in this draft, Brendan, because it's a very strong draft for cornerbacks. So that's going to be a little bit of what maybe impacts the outlook on this one. But I thought Michael had a pretty strong year when he was out there playing last year. I think for the price, he gives you a good all-around player that can play a good, pretty strong zone, and then also a very good tackler out there in the position. And this might be also one with, depending on how the Tariq Woolen thing settles out too within this, is Tariq Woolen looked at as a long-term guy as well. So I think I could see some upshot on this one.
Yeah, I think the Woolen situation obligates you to keep Jackson as a break glass in case of Woolen not working out type situation. And for 2.8, he's worth that. I think on the open market, he'd get about $3 million a year.
Yeah. I think his own team would jump on at least for that. Agreed.
So yeah, that is our other restricted free agent. Now we just have 6 exclusive rights free agents.
Okay.
And to go over ERFA rules, exclusive rights, basically it means they have a tender that is equivalent to the minimum amount of money a player can make with their level of experience. It's that varies depending on how many years you played, but it's always going to be like less than $1 million. So it's always like 985,000, 905,000, somewhere around there. And the player cannot turn it down. If they don't want to be tendered, the only thing they can really do is retire or beg the team to just take it off of them.
Right.
All right. So our 6 ERFAs, I'll lead off with Jake Curhan. ERFA would cost less than $1 million to keep him around. It's uncomfortable. The problem is if you're bringing him back to be your backup right tackle, that kind of sucks because you're probably going to have to use your backup right tackle at some point because of the Abe Lucas thing. I need something a little better than Curhan at my backup right tackle spot, but Curhan has played at other positions. He's played on the interior. There is a little bit of flexibility there. So if the situation was normal and Abe Lucas didn't have these injury concerns, I would say yes. But I think because of the Abe Lucas situation, I kind of have to be a no. I have to aim a little bit higher right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I just don't think he gives you a lot. There's the familiarity there, but I don't think there's a lot of great play there right now as it currently stands. So, agreed.
Yeah, it sucks because I like Curhan. I love what he's been able to do here. I think that he's overachieved expectations coming out of college, but I just can't make it make sense. I need somebody like at least a Roger Rosengarten level player.
Yeah, I would be the same way. And which I think he's going to go up boards, but that's more of where I think you should shoot for. And you've got Stone who can play both sides, so it's also you feel okay about where it's at with that because of that.
Okay, next up, you lead with this one. Miles Adams, ERFA.
Miles Adams, 3-tech, actually had some moments where he's been okay on the field at times. I don't feel like he ever really kind of took the step forward I was hoping he could take in his game, and I don't know if that step forward's coming. I think that they gave him some ample opportunities, and where the defensive line was playing last year, there was a ton of opportunities, but just wasn't able to really take advantage of it. I think the 3-tech's kind of stacked as it is right now, especially bring back Leonard Williams. So you're signing him at that 1 million as the fourth 3-tech on the roster at that point. Is he really going to get much of any opportunities to really play? It's a draft filled with a lot of really good 3-techs that you might be able to get third, fourth, fifth round. A guy that gives you a similar, if not better, skill set at that point. I'm not against doing it, Brendan. I don't have like a passionate feeling on this one, but I would probably be more no than yes because of that.
Yeah, in a vacuum, I would do it, but in this circumstance, you probably can't because of the 3-tech situation that you just mentioned. I think this is a guy you probably hope makes it through to the practice squad.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably going to be the play here.
That'd be great if you could pull that off. Sure.
Yeah, but I still kind of like Miles Adams. I feel like the right circumstance could bring out something okay in him. I like him more than I should.
Yeah, I always thought he was going to take a little bit more of a step. Never thought star, but just maybe find a way to get it solidly into a role in the team on the line. It never kind of went that way.
And I do wonder if part of it is just that Pete fell in love with some of his guys. Like Jaron Reed is my guy. He's going to play 800 snaps every week,
Very well could have been. Yeah, that adds up.
Next ERFA, I'll lead Joshua Onu-Giogu. Played a little bit last year, but I don't see any reason why he would be better than any other player you could get in UDFA this year. So I'm going to be a no on that one.
Yeah, there's not much there with this one. I'd be no too.
Yeah. You take Brady Russell.
Brady Russell. Man, I didn't see hardly any of them on the field, so I just would probably go no on that one. I don't know too much with him, but I think you just no. I don't have any real information with him though.
Yeah, I mean, even if you want to go really, really cheap at tight end 3, then you can do the Westover thing. That's actually cheaper. It's actually less money to get Westover and UDFA than it is to keep Brady Russell around.
Right. Which it's like half the price basically on that front of things. So yeah, no, I'd be a no on that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Next guy, I will take Ty Okada, and this one I'm actually a yes on. Gotta help the safety room out a little bit. I liked Okada in college when I watched his tape a little bit. He's somebody who's been around for a year now. I know he was just on the practice squad and he never played, but he was here. And we're going to be dumping some serious safeties. Plus, remember, Jarek Reed's going to start the season on IR probably.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to keep Okada around, maybe just for the first few weeks until Jarek Reed can come back. But I want him to stick around. I'm willing to throw that ERFA tag down on him.
Again, I'm just a little bit like last Brady. I don't know too much with Okada, so probably watched a little bit of college tape on last year, but not much else other than that with it. So,
yeah. And the final one is Patrick O'Connell, the linebacker.
Yeah, with the Army. Is that the Army kid? I think.
I think he was Montana State.
Yeah, he was in for a little bit last year in preseason. I don't think he did much to flash.
Very slow.
Very slow. So there's not really much there with that one either to interest me.
Yeah, I mean, even with how thin we are at linebacker, I think I'm a no on that one too.
Yeah, and then we are thin, but yeah, what are you gonna do?
All right, and we did it. That's all of them. We got all through the free agents, and I think it's all pretty manageable. I think we can create enough money to keep most of these guys, and I think most of the guys we're going to lose are the guys we don't mind losing.
No, and I think there's a way for the Hawks within this, Brendan, too, because I don't think there'd be as much money out there in free agency for them to spend even after we do these re-signings. There is a way to play the compensatory game on these. So with not necessarily re-signing some of these guys, like your Fant, your Damian Lewis, your Jordan Brooks, So a nice part about re-signing Bobby and Leonard Williams, and then potentially maybe only one other signing you might make major-wise out on free agency if you do, is that then that offset maybe still works in your favor. Maybe you don't get the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, round pick compensatory. Maybe it's a fourth and a fifth, something like that on an offset.
Maybe somebody will hire Aiden Durden a couple of years to be their head coach.
Hey. You know what I mean?
2 third-round picks.
2 third-round picks.
Let's go. But what else is there? I will say, when I put together my personal preferred path for this offseason, I was able to get through all of this and still have about 35 million in cap space. Now, about 12 million is going to go to the draft because you also have to pay your UDFAs some money. So it's not going to all carry over into open free agency, but I was able to create like 20 million for open free agency.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
That's about where my numbers were too. I was a little tighter, especially if we're doing the Leonard Williams, Bobby signing both. Like
Mhm.
if those two do click in and go down, then for me, the money got a little tighter on that at that point. But initially with the recuts I was willing to do, you are rolling over too. It's a little bit talked about. This doesn't get brought up much, Brendan, but you will be rolling some money over from this year's cap in addition. It's at $7 million unused according to Sports Track right now. I think there's some finalized business they have to do on the books for this year. Like a couple guys get injury settlements or whatever. It'll be about 5 million. You'll probably roll into this next year's cap on top. So there's a little bit of space there. There's a little bit to do with, but we got to be a little bit surgical rather than, it's going to be the scalpel rather than the axe, this off season with our approach.
Right. So I'm excited, man. I think that this is a very feasible way to go about things. And I think that if we do it, we're going to be looking pretty good for 2024.
I agree, man. And you set the stage too by, I think, with some of the moves we're advocating for, by both maybe positioning yourselves for a chance to make some noise in 2024, but also not having an all-in approach to where you've got the future still there and ready to be okay with. Because some of this has also got to be with, can't go hog wild this year, because right now already with 2025, we're sitting on about $40 million of cap space for 2025 right now as it currently stands. So
right.
Got to keep an eye on that just a little bit. Well, folks, thank you for tuning in today. Really appreciate all of the many donations over on the chat and channel here. As I always say, just do me this quick favor here and hit that like button if you could for me on either whether watching on Brendan's side or my side. Either way, hit that like button. It does help this show up on other algorithm searches. Do get subscribed up the Hawks Nest or Seahawks Brendan Nelson on either side of that. We will be doing these shows at least once a week, and we'll get a couple, two shows in a week. I'm sure we'll fit in here this off season as well. So keep track, keep locked in with us as we will keep this going. Any final thoughts from you on this, Brendan?
No, I think we covered it all pretty good. Gino's contract becomes fully guaranteed tomorrow, so we're less than 3 hours away. They've already announced they're going to do it. That would be really mean, right?
Yeah.
That would be really mean.
Pretty cold-blooded, yeah.
And I guess dre'mont. They haven't said anything about dre'mont. They could do something in the next 2.5 hours.
Yeah, and it makes sense. We knew this was going to go where these guys probably were going to stay. There was a chance they could go, but it just didn't make a ton of sense for it to happen. So this tracks to what we thought would play out and go down, and that's better for the team, better for this upcoming season, the potential for the season that they're taking this approach, I think, Brendan. So I'm encouraged and liking what we're seeing.
All right. And next week's show is going to be open free agency, the free agents from other teams that the Seahawks might be looking at.
And we will be on Tuesday next week because I'm doing a trip on Thursday. So this B&B show will be taking place on Tuesday next week with that particular show. So be on the lookout for your notifications from that. We'll get the show set up here maybe this weekend or something to get the notes to you guys on that. Brendan, thank you for coming in the house, doing this as ever, man. I appreciate you on that.
Thank you.
We will be back in less than a week span here, Seahawks fans, but the offseason's heating up. Things are cooking. We're getting a bit more firmer picture of what's going to go down here this offseason and what the plan is. And we're going to get even further as we go through this offseason. So stick with us. Keep the faith here on this rebuild. It's looking good. The parameters looking right. Things are being done smart. The coaching hires sounded pretty smart in those press conferences today and the way they talked about this team and their approach. All of them seem to be successively pointing in the same direction and how they want to seek to accomplish this, which is very, very, very encouraging. Back in less than a week, but until that time, my fellow Seahawks fans, please, by God, don't you ever forget. Never, ever, ever forget. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.